for us, making sure we are online because we are up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. I know Doty's super stoked about that, as well as being live here on 101 ESPN. Happy to have you along here. Really excited to be at Enterprise Center for what feels like a untraditional NHL draft for the Blues. At least I should say untraditional over the last couple of years, because the Blues, of course, make the playoffs this past year, getting to Game 7 against the Winnipeg Jets. So they're not drafting top 10. They're not going out there and looking for somebody that's going to impact this team for the now. Doug Armstrong even said that much when he met with the media this past Monday, talking about how, look, this player that could be selected tonight at number 19 overall may not impact the Blues for 3 to 4 years. And of course, it's just continuing to build what the Blues have been focusing on over the last few seasons in terms of this retool, or as Tom Stillman and company have labeled it, whatever. We do hope to have a ton of guests along the way, hoping to be joined by Jim Montgomery. Jeremy Rutherford is going to join us in about 15 minutes or so. Hopefully going to be joined by Doug Armstrong, potentially Tony Feltrin, maybe a couple of other front office members, and some special guests along the way. So we will have you taken care of tonight all the way up until the Blues make their selection at 19th overall. But again, the Blues picking 19th overall might be a couple of hours from now, but there's plenty of other news and notes to get into around the NHL coming into this one. And really, you start with just the noise that has been taking place around the National Hockey League. I guess that started a couple of days ago, but really amped up as we got to this afternoon and then closer to this evening. And I'm talking about the trades. You know, the NHL draft always seems to have a ton of rumors behind it. It builds a lot of steam, but then it feels like it doesn't follow through with the trades. We've already seen 2 first-round draft picks get traded earlier today. Another one that just got pushed to this year's draft versus last year's draft. That was from the Rangers to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So Pittsburgh moved up in the draft. And we've seen some position players get traded earlier today in terms of Noah Dobson. He was traded away from the New York Islanders to the Montreal Canadiens. We saw a couple of other forwards get moved earlier this afternoon. So there is a lot of action in the National Hockey League today, which of course brings up all of the rumor mills. It starts talking about, what could potentially happen for certain teams, for certain players, if your team is looking to add a little bit more juice to them. And that's where I know a lot of you that are listening and viewing right now for the St. Louis Blues wonder what could take place. As, by the way, the New York Islanders looks like are officially on the clock as Elliot Friedman is walking people through this decentralized draft that's taking place out in the New York Islanders organization, UBS Arena. So once they get on the clock officially, then we will officially be underway. But, the one thing that sticks out to me as we just touch on some news and notes around the National Hockey League, the one thing that stands out to me is something Doug Armstrong talked to us about on Monday when he met with the assembled media, just kind of the primer for the NHL draft. And he was asked about just trades in general, about how you're trying to upgrade your roster. And he said the hard part about this is there are so many teams right now around the National Hockey League that believe they are playoff teams. There are teams like the Montreal Canadiens, like the Anaheim Ducks now that have made some roster moves. There are teams that looked at their roster at the end of the regulars, or the end of the postseason, I should say, when Florida won the Stanley Cup, that says we have the chance to be better than what we expected this year. So there's just not a lot of trade partners going on around the National Hockey League, which means you don't see a whole lot of trades taking place. As the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber, is back from his duties that he was just taking place up on stage. I told him, Kerbs, man, you've got like 17 different jobs tonight. You're going to be going back and forth like a chicken with your head cut off.
I'm perfectly fine with it. The lobster truck was in town yesterday. Did you know? So
the lobster
so
truck?
the main lobster
like the
truck. Well, no. So it's a company, and it went huge. I think, they went on, and this one's based out of Nashville, and every now and then you log on, and they'll come in, and they parked out in Ellisville, and you get, Maine lobster rolls, and they'll do a Connecticut style. So Maine lobster rolls are done with the Maine, kind of with a mayonnaise base, right? Yeah. Connecticut lobster rolls are lobster with melted butter, still in the same bun. And so I got some good calories to be running around.
There you go. So you're ready to go with this one. Well,
I'm excited for tonight. Just from a standpoint of, I don't know, Alex, honestly, if the Blues are going to do anything in terms of movement of any kind. I am always excited to see if it happens. But we've also seen, especially with first-round picks lately, the Blues really have just stuck to the ground. Like
Yeah.
if there was a year that you thought you might see them, use something to move up, it would have been 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
When they had the 3 picks in the first round. So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what happens. Schaefer appears to be the number one, obviously the consensus number one. We just talked to Ryan Miller, but then there's a whole group between kind of like 2 through 8,
right?
That some people might have number 8 in a mock draft going second, and vice versa, and all the way through there. There also seems to be, and you guys have brought this up a lot over the course of the last couple of weeks. There also seems to be a real groundswell around the National Hockey League of this is officially, they've just let the horses out of the starting gate at the Derby here to start improving their teams another way. And the groundswell to me is, I believe it was last year there were no trades in the first round.
Yeah, I believe that's correct, because there was speculation of it being very active, and it wasn't.
Yeah, and the difference this time is I just get the feeling of the angst around teams in the league where, okay, there's a lot of teams that are pretty good. There's not a lot of teams that are great.
Yeah.
And there's really not a whole lot of way for you to upgrade your team right now, unless you're making hockey trades and changing chemistry, things like this. I feel like we're moving into a summer of hockey trades.
Yeah.
Now that I've said that, I could be totally wrong and nothing will happen. But to me, it does feel like we're kind of in that, and we've seen some already. You saw the Noah Dobson trade today. You saw Tarasov, a backup goaltender, going to Florida yesterday. Charlie Coyle, is an interesting one. Now that one doesn't move the needle for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you are seeing just some trades like that. Now you've had some trades. You saw Trevor Zegras.
Yeah. Okay,
go to Philadelphia. And that's kind of the example of, I guess that might be the best example of what I'm talking about here, because if Anaheim's at the point where you got to start improving, okay, Pat Verbeek's been their general manager long enough that you got to be knocking on the door better at this point.
And you don't bring in Joel Quenneville unless you're hoping to compete.
Well, they knew they were, and I guarantee you, Joel Quenneville's going, okay, I want this kind of player. Okay, you're not getting in Ryan Poling the same skilled player in Trevor Zegras.
Right.
But you are getting a guy that's going to win you some pucks that Trevor Zegras never will. Okay. And that is a Joel Quenneville style. Okay. So that's going to be a really, really big difference. If you look at the Florida Panthers and what they've done in the last 2 Stanley Cups, you know how far away the Anaheim Ducks are. And it has nothing to do with talent to me as much as it has to do with grit and sandpaper and a willingness to win.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy that they brought in to change the culture to winning now is Joel Quenneville.
Yeah.
It's what Doug Armstrong has said here a couple times when he brought in Ken Hitchcock, when he brought in Jim Montgomery. He said, hey, well, now I know I have a coach. It's on the players, okay? Verbeek now knows he has a coach.
Yeah.
It's on the players. But I do think that you're going to see another grouping of trades between now and, say, the end of July. And potentially could see, I honestly think you might see the most active August that we've seen in a while. Normally the August is when things lay low. I think you actually could see the most active August, because with no trade clauses, with other things kicking in and adjusting, guys that had full no trade clauses, now it's a modified no trade clause, things like that. What players had agents that overvalued them and turned down deals they should have taken, right, that are now still on the table in July and into August. That's how teams can shape themselves. And I think that we're going to see, it just feels to me like it could be one of the more active summers that we've seen.
Well, and I mentioned this before you got in here. What I find so fascinating about this offseason, Curbs, is what Doug Armstrong told us on Monday. He said, there's just not a lot of teams that don't view themselves now as a potential team that could make the playoffs, which changes how off seasons work. Typically, there's teams that are willing to take on bad contracts so that they can eat some salary cap and get the picks. I mean, San Jose's looking at this as hey, maybe we can at least put a little bit more of a competitive roster out there this season. You don't have those as much. You have more teams that say, hey, we could compete in this, which means hockey trades may not happen as much often.
Yeah, except the problem is there's only one team that wins their last game of the year.
Right.
And that means in the playoffs. I realize some of the teams that missed the playoffs could have won their last game of the year, but there's only one in the playoffs. Okay,
16 that probably win their last game of the season.
That wins it. but the reason that I sit there and think, I look at what Las Vegas has done since they've come into the league. I look at what Doug Armstrong did with the offer sheets.
Yeah.
I look at how, for a very long time until this last year, Boston stayed one of the challenging teams in the National Hockey League. Tampa Bay right now is trying to figure out how do they do what Boston did to stay where they were. But at some point in time, if you're the Chicago Blackhawks and you've missed the playoffs 7 straight years, because I don't count the bubble for them,
yeah.
Okay, and you're the San Jose Sharks that haven't made the playoffs now since 2019, and you're the Anaheim Ducks, right? You're one of these teams. You're the Buffalo Sabres.
There
Holy
we go.
Macaroni.
That's
right.
It.
You're the Buffalo Sabres, right? Like at some point in time, you just got to get better, right? And you might have to look at a different way. And there's been a blueprint in the National Hockey League to me that Vegas has shown you how to do it. It's just, do you have ownership that's going to be aggressive enough to do that? And I think that I just think how you build a team, it's changing. It's changing. I don't know, as a fan base, like I'm a Kevin Adams fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Known him since he was at Miami of Ohio as a player.
Shout out.
And he was a first-round draft pick of the Boston Bruins. They had an ownership that didn't give Kevin Adams the same kind of room to build a hockey team from a management side like Doug Armstrong has done,
mm-hmm.
right? Think of the names that Doug Armstrong has in this room, right? But at some point in time, like, you just got to get better at your picking. And I just asked Ryan Miller, if you go back and you think, you go back to since the Blues were dead last in the league and drafted Eric Johnson first overall, and then you think of the late middle, the 17 to 20th range, and then the last third, late first round picks, and you're putting in there TJ Oshie, David Perron, Patrick Berglund, right? None of them were top 15.
Yep.
Okay. Then you put in there, then you add Robbie Fabry.
Yep.
Okay. Now we add a Robert Thomas. You add a Zach Bolduc.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Jimmy Snuggerud.
You add Jimmy Snuggerud now into that mix. You look at a guy like Colton Parayko in the 3rd round, Joel Edmondson, right? 2nd round, a 3rd round with Jordan Bennington, 2nd round for Jordan Kyrou. Look at the impactful players that the Blues have taken when they haven't had the benefit of a top 5, top 10 pick.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten really, really good at that. So it can be done. Some of these other organizations just haven't figured out how you need your hockey staff to be able to do it.
Yep, which is why these draft nights are always so fascinating. Real quick, Kerb, because I know you got to go run out there with a couple of duties to get to. Who do you think teams are trying to emulate more right now? You mentioned the Vegas Golden Knights.
What do you mean in terms of the draft or in terms of
how they build their roster? It's got to be Florida, right?
Well, it's a copycat league, Alex.
Yep.
All these sports leagues are. You have to have some talent, and then you go out and you trade for others. If you go back, and we can do this a little later on in the program.
Yeah.
If you go back and you look at the different teams that have won the Stanley Cup,
mm-hmm.
right, and look at who they've, like, we won the Stanley Cup because we traded for Ryan O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Florida traded for Matthew Tkachuk. Tampa really had more of their draft picks than just about any other team in that standpoint. We traded for Braden Shen.
Yep.
Okay. You look at those deals. Florida traded for Bobrovsky, right? They couldn't develop a goalie.
Yeah.
For a long time. They traded for Bobrovsky. All right. I mean, you put all that stuff in there. And to me, I don't know that there's anyone that you emulate that how you build it, but I do know that you need to somehow find a way, right, to get some of your own talent in there before you can supplement with trades.
He's Chris Kerber. He's going to be along with us all night long with his duties. He's going to be going back and forth. He'll be back a little bit from now. The Islanders are officially underway. They selected Matthew Schaefer, the left-handed defenseman who was expected to go. I personally love in these drafts how they start the clock for the number 1 overall pick that has 3 minutes. this team has been trying to decide what to do for the last 3 weeks, and they're like, let's hold off on this a little bit. They get down to a minute, and they select the guy that everybody expected, but they got to get their montages out there. Regardless, Schaefer's off the board. The draft is underway. We're going to take a break. There's plenty of rumors going on. Let's talk it over with our athletic insider, Jeremy Rutherford. He joins us next. It is the NHL Draft Show here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Since 1983, Nissan has been assembling award-winning vehicles for you, right here in America. And this summer, we're committed to keeping our lineup affordable and free from new tariffs. That's why we've lowered MSRP on our best-selling Rogue,
It's all here on Curbside, your next day post-game podcast with the voice of the St. Louis Blues, Chris Kerber. Catch new episodes of the Curbside podcast after every Blues game on your 101.
$68.88 or visit me online.
Enterprise Center for our NHL Draft Show. Alex Ferrario with you alongside my co-host on the Last Minute Blues podcast. Of course, you see his work over at The Athletic. This is his favorite time of the year. He is Jeremy Rutherford, which first off, my man, congratulations on the contract extension with The Athletic. That's great news. Hold on. I think we got a mic on. There we go.
I really appreciate it, Alex. That was a tough decision leaving the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, a dream job back in 2017, and hoping the Athletic would work. It seems like it has, and looking forward to 3 more years of Blues coverage.
They did that perfect timing, though. Would you have preferred them to drag it out maybe until preseason just to make you sweat a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well,
Get it done now before all the hard work comes in.
Well, in this industry, as we all know, that's all we do is sweat.
That's very true, especially this time of the year. And you've got to be doing tons of sweating with this one, JR, because we know that rumors always come out at this time of the year, right? Like, we know that this is what happens. Everybody's got something that another team wants, and you start to pick it up. Are you surprised at all at how many times you've seen Jordan Kyrou's name over the last couple of days?
Yeah, probably not surprised that I've seen it a lot lately. Probably a little surprised that we didn't see it sooner, say a month or 2 ago. And I know it was mentioned. You mentioned it. We mentioned it on the podcast. I've mentioned it in stories at The Athletic saying, hey, look, his no trade clause kicks in on July 1st. And are the Blues going to think about trading him? We've been talking about that for a little while, but I don't think that it really picked up steam around the league and his name got out there in terms of being available by the Blues. I think that with Jordan Kyrou, I don't think the Blues are necessarily going out saying to teams, hey, we want to move him. Let's come up with a deal. I think it's more a case of there are potential deals out there that they would like. And if they have to move Jordan Kyrou to make it happen, they will. So I don't think they're actively shopping him. I think that they're trying to improve their team, and it might take giving up Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah, well, and we've seen all of the speculation out there, which is really what this is, but we've seen it from yesterday. It was his name tied to the J.J. Peterka trade with the Buffalo Sabres. Earlier today, we saw it was potentially the Montreal Canadiens, or not Montreal, Islanders for Noah Dobson, and then that went to the Montreal Canadiens. And then, I mean, it just feels like every hour it's Elliot Friedman coming out saying, like, hey, his name is out there. And then you're hearing Darren Dreger saying, hey, Blues are tied to the Buffalo Sabres with this one. And the question that you and I talked about on the podcast, JR, on top of the one that I think I've asked ad nauseum over the last couple of days on our show, can you improve your roster by trading a player of that ilk that scores 70-plus points for you for 3 straight seasons? Now, I don't know what's coming back on the other side, but it just seems like, yes, you have to give to get, but what are you trying to get that makes you an improved team?
It's a great question, and I think it's one that everybody out there is wondering. I think there are Jordan Kyrou fans who say, look, he was a plus 23 last year, led the team. He's changed his game, his all-around game. He's playing better defense. This is a guy you need to hang on to. And there's another half of the fan base who says, yeah, move him if you can improve the team. Alex, the way I've looked at this type of question over the years is big picture. You have to let things unfold. Let's say they traded Jordan Kyrou tonight, and you got some people who are upset. How are you going to replace the scoring? Well, Snuggerud's going to score more. Zach Bolduc's going to score more. And so I think people could look at the situation and say it's possible, but who knows what happens in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, where now it looks like the Blues have a hole up front.
Yeah. And
then Doug Armstrong goes out and fills that hole. So I think people get sometimes ahead of themselves in terms of, okay, well, this is what Doug's doing. He just traded Kyrou, and now the Blues don't look as good up front in terms of the offensive production, but you just have to let things play out, see what else he's got up his sleeve, and it could take time. Like, look, who would have thought after the draft last year that the Blues would have Broberg and Holloway. And it's just a perfect example of that's how long things take before you start the season.
Well, and I love what you said, because I think the important factor into this is it's not that they're actively shopping him. Like Vladimir Tarasenko, I think, is another really great example of this. Yeah, his name was dangled out there, but it's not so much they're forced to trade the player. Like you saw Noah Dobson traded today, and I think a lot of people saw the return and it's like, that's all you got for a guy that you believe could be a top pair defenseman. That's when you're forced into a trade. And when you're forced into a trade, there's really not that much that you can get in return. But in the sense of a Kyrou, like maybe his name's being asked by other teams, maybe the Blues are looking for an upgrade, but that doesn't mean they're trying to get rid of him. If you come back with a 33 goal scorer and a 75 point producer, that's a good thing for a team.
Yeah, and you look at the Dobson situation, what they give up Montreal 16 and 17.
16 and 17, and then I think the equivalent to who did Emil Heineman is I felt like it was kind of a Alexei Toropchenko-esque player.
Yeah, and you look at the Islanders, according to several reports, I think Frank Seravalli at the Daily Faceoff is saying that then the Islanders could turn these picks into a top 10 pick and pick the local guy, and then they come away with Schaefer and the local kid, Hagen. And so I think that the New York Islanders could look at this like, hey, a week ago we were trying to decide, should we pay Noah Dobson $10 or $11 million? Now we don't have that problem on our hands. And oh, by the way, now we have Schaefer and Hagen. So I think things can change quickly for a team. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. That's why, we have the luxury of being able to look ahead and kind of preview, hey, what could happen, and then look back and say, hey, here's how it all played out. But just down the room here, Doug Armstrong and his staff is in the room trying to figure it all out, and that's what the Islanders had to do today. So again, I just go back to what I said earlier about the patience and letting it all come together.
By the way, just side note, there was so much of a delay on stage with this pick for the San Jose Sharks that I'm thinking it's like, okay, did they trade the pick? Because that was rumored out there. I really think this was just a matter of they couldn't find the person that's announcing the pick, and they had to go find him because Bettman just ran out on stage, and now they're announcing the person that's coming out. I'm just going to make a bold prediction now. The decentralized draft will not be a thing after this year.
Yeah, and you know what? We got Doty here does a great job with the audio here. Like, I don't envy the people who are doing all these things, because you saw that. Like, I don't know what he thinks, but I think they had the Montreal. Did they have, what staff did they have on the Islanders staff?
Oh yeah,
doing the first pick, and just watching the show, and the audio's not as great as you're in person announcing the pick, and so I think I need to be in LA right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, why wouldn't you? Vegas with the Sphere last year, Nashville prior to that. Like, JR's just hoping the moment they go to Montreal or Winnipeg, that's where JR's like, no draft for me on this one. JR, a couple more questions for you. Are you surprised that the names that have been connected to the Blues have been defensemen? Like Noah Dobson's name yesterday from Chris Johnston. Today, Darren Dreger has said that, the Blues have checked in on Bo Byram, checked in being the key word. I, for the longest time, thought that the center position was where this team was focusing on, finding somebody that fits into the core of the top six for the center spot. But to go the defenseman route, it kind of threw me off guard.
Yeah, somewhat, except for Doug Armstrong said the other day that if I can improve the defense, I will. And I think he said that he likes the top four. He says it's not the best top four, but it's better than average. And so I think if you're checking in on a Dobson, which they appeared to do, if you're checking in on a Byram, those are guys who could step in that second pair and perhaps, take the spot of a Justin Falk, or maybe move Falk to a third pair right side. So I'm not surprised that they're checking into it. Will anything develop at this moment? It doesn't look like it. But Alex, looking at it from a different perspective, it kind of tells me, where are they going to go get that center? Does that mean that they're going to get him in free agency, because there's not a lot of center talk right now? Like, you don't hear the Blues connected to Marco Rossi, right? And Charlie Coyle was traded today, and the Blues evidently not involved in him. So there's some centers move. So, more so than does it surprise me that they're talking about defensemen with the Blues right now? Not as much, but okay, now where's that centerman coming from? Is he coming in for agency? And again, that was fantasy land. Bennett, but he gets the 8x8 today. But there aren't a ton out there. We can talk about Michael Granlund. I know there's some pros and cons with bringing him in, but I did check in with some people today, and there does appear to be some interest. And but he's a guy. This is the tough part. He's a guy who's going to draw significant interest in the market, and Doug and these guys have to check everybody, because you get turned down by three guys, and now you got a hole there in that middle six center.
Yeah, like sticker shock is going to be a real thing.
It really
this free
is.
Agency, especially like when you look at the center spot after Bennett signed, after Tavares signed. You mentioned Granlund. Like, I honestly believe Radek Faksa might be the third best centerman that's available in free agency, because you've got Suter, you've got Granlund, who I personally think he's a winger, but then you've got Faksa. Like, the sticker shot is going to be a real thing for some of these teams, which I just don't know if the team's in a state to where it's worth going out there and overpaying for something like that.
And people have to understand that's a result of the cap going up. Look, it's going to be 108. It's going to be 113. And as Doug said the other day, these players want a contract that looks good not only today, but also it looks good in 3 or 4 years. So, like he said, he thinks a lot of fans are going to be looking after July 1st and saying, that guy got that much.
Right.
Well, we haven't seen that the past couple of years, because the cap's been pretty stagnant, through COVID, so on and so forth. So you could look in a couple, in a few days here after free agency, Pius Suter got 6.5.
Right.
Like, this is crazy. And so that's why, perhaps with Radek Faksa, there's not a deal done yet, because he knows that he could make some good money wherever he goes, even if he does want to come back to the Blues. He can't pass up big money if that's what's being offered right now.
And I think the reason I asked that Kyrou for a defenseman question, because that's what the speculation has been, is you trade that to get the defenseman. Sure, you make yourself elite maybe in the top four, But now you're stuck in the same spot of we're looking to upgrade that center position. There's not a whole lot there in free agency, but you're also looking at, well, now you might need to go out there and find the winger. And that's the part that I find confusing, to the point of you're thinking maybe these guys that you don't know much about can produce that factor. There's just a lot of moving parts. But the one thing about Doug Armstrong is if he does A, B, C, and D are following.
Yeah, they're thought out and could be followed. And look, let's say you moved Kyrou for a defenseman today. Let's say it was for Dobson. Now you got an extra defenseman, say it's Falk. Maybe you attach a player, or, you got a move in mind where you can move Falk and you can get that third line center for a Justin Falk. I'm not saying that's possible. I'm just saying those are how things are interconnected.
All right, one more, Jared, I wanted to ask you about, and we talked about this on the podcast, which you can go check out on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. I think I'm seeing a lot of people on our YouTube conversation, a lot of people on the text line saying Doug has to make a move this offseason. Do you believe he has to make a move?
Yeah, I think he has to. I think there's a massive hole at center in the middle six. And, I think that even if Braden Shen can come back and have a 20-25 goal season, and let's just say 45 points, 50 points, like, you need more offensive production from the center position. So I'm a huge Oscar Sundqvist fan. I like what he does. If Faksa doesn't come back, I think, Sundqvist could be your fourth line center. If not, I think he could go to the wing, but they've got to bring in a guy who's defensively responsible, but also can put up some points in the middle. And I think if they don't have that guy, they go into the season. I don't know how you can consider that team. I think they could still be a playoff team, but a true contender. You can't be a true contender unless they improve up the middle.
I know you have an article out on a St. Louis kid to keep an eye on tonight or potentially this weekend in one of the draft picks, right?
Yeah, Shane Van Sage, met him last week. He started playing, I think he told me he started skating at Afton when he was 3 years old.
3 years old. See, I knew I couldn't become a hockey player at 34.
3 years old. And so he went to, I believe, CBC for a year, and then he did the development program. And now he's at Michigan State. He's a freshman. He had a great year. He was the 6th youngest player in NCAA hockey this year.
Wow.
St. Louis. And the cool part, Alex, when I talked to him, he said that he watched the Tkachuk draft. I believe it was 2016. And he said, it would be cool to continue that St. Louis pipeline. And at that point, it's still a dream. Like, he's still obviously a ways off at that point. But he said from that point on, he watched the draft every single year. They'd sit with the parents in the living room and watch the draft. And tonight, he's out in L.A. at the Peabody and could hear his name called tonight, if not tonight, tomorrow. And I'm working with him on a piece where he's taking some video, taking some pictures, and just kind of keeping track in a journal type way.
That's awesome.
What he's doing out there. And we'll have that piece up at the Athletic when he gets back from LA.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully we hear his name and keep that St. Louis connection going strong. JR, always appreciate you hopping down, man. I know you got like 17 other duties tonight, so go enjoy this draft, and hopefully we'll hear some type of news soon.
I looked up at the TV and I thought that was us. I was like, man, we look good, but that's a different studio.
That's none of us. No, we're on YouTube, and I could promise you and I don't look good at all. JR, appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks, buddy.
There you go. Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. Always appreciate him swinging down. And again, make sure you follow all of his work on Twitter at JP Rutherford. We've got Grant Francis back in our studio taking care of us tonight. Grant's on breaking news duty, which, Grant, I feel like we're going to hype that up and be like, breaking news, if any trade comes down, we'll pop in with a sounder and we'll bring it up. You know how these things work. There's breaking news where you think it's going to happen, and then absolutely zero happens, and then we just get left on feeling less fulfilled after an NHL draft.
Yeah, I know. I looking forward to today and all the rumors and stuff we had going on. You thought that, you're going to get a lot of it, which we might still get some of those. I have that sounder ready for if it happens, but it does seem like leading up to these nights, a lot of times there's a lot of conversation happening, a lot of rumors happening, and then you might not get as much of it as you expected earlier in the day. Obviously, we had the big move earlier today by the Islanders with Noah Dobson, but it's going to be interesting to see if we get a lot of those trades, because I don't know about you, Alex, but leading up to today, comparing it to years past, it felt like there was a lot more action surrounding this draft and surrounding moves for NHL teams than in years past.
Yeah, well, and especially when you see those first-round picks getting traded, like you don't see them very often get moved. And I mean, there was a part of me that was thinking, it's like, man, did this number 2 overall pick get traded by San Jose? Because they said, like, San Jose is listening on offers right now. The whole conversation of the New York Islanders trying to trade up to get James Higgins, who's from Long Island, which is still a possibility.
Well, and you bringing that up, I just want to say this. Stefan Rosner, who's a beat reporter for the Islanders, he tweeted out about an hour ago, I do think Utah will be the team the Isles will look to be trading with, even if many think Higgins will fall lower than that in the draft. He also said I wouldn't rule out Nashville at number 5 either. So talking about the Islanders, like obviously for our reasoning here in St. Louis, they're not super important, but when they're potentially trading with these teams that are in the Central Division, which just seems to keep getting better and better as time goes on, Utah and Nashville are 2 teams that have been talked about, the Islanders having trade conversations with, at least at this point.
I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about that on the other side. And if Kerbs comes back, we'll see kind of where he wants to go with it, because I do know Kerbs really wants to get into the NHL CBA. There's a chance we might have Jim Montgomery swing by as well. So we're kind of keeping you on your toes tonight here at the NHL Draft Show, as the 3rd pick was just made by Jeremy Roenick and the Chicago Blackhawks, which looks like, if I'm understanding this, is this Porter Matrone guy that just got selected, or is it somebody else? I think it's somebody else. Anton Frindell. So my mistake. It was a European skater gets selected by the Blackhawks 3rd overall. So draft moving along. Let's touch on that Central Division. Unless Kerbs comes back or another guest pops in. It's the NHL Draft Show. We're live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. We're also on our text line. Hop in the conversation next year on 101 ESPN.
ESPN.
Final time here in the 6 o'clock hour of the NHL Draft Show, as the third overall pick was just selected by the Chicago Blackhawks. So we'll see kind of what goes on from here, as the Utah Hockey Club is on the clock, and this is one of them that has been rumored to potentially be available via trade. The New York Islanders, as Grant just talked about, were connected to this one. So we'll kind of see what takes place here as Utah's on the clock. But Chris Kerber back with us after being up on stage with Jim Montgomery. And Kerbs, the one thing I know we wanted to get into today, which might be the perfect time still early on in this draft, is the CBA agreement that took place earlier this morning, where Gary Bettman and company spoke about a 4-year extension that goes after next season. So essentially 5 more years of NHL pieces, the way they're labeling it. And there are some really fascinating bullet points in this one that I know stuck out to you.
There's a lot of nuances and fascination of this one. Number one, I think I'm going to assume that the reporting from some of the like the Pierre LeBruns, the Elliot Friedmans, and those guys, that their sources inside the Board of Governors who were briefed on this on Wednesday night or Wednesday during the day, I'm going to assume that their reporting is accurate for the sake of this discussion. What's important to note is when Gary Bettman and the NHLPA met the media today, they refused to talk any of the specifics because nothing has been ratified. The owners still have to take it to their group to get it voted on. The players, and it's going to take a couple weeks, have to take it to their group to get it voted on. And barring any surprises, then you'll have a 4-year extension of the collective bargaining agreement. Why is that important? I really started thinking today that when Gary Bettman steps aside and resigns as commissioner of the National Hockey League sometime over the next couple of years, that he has stated he's probably going to do, it'll be a fascinating era to go back and look at. There were so many, especially in the first half of that era, that thought that, there was just no growth. The league wasn't marketing itself well. The first 3 opportunities you had from a labor negotiating standpoint, you had lockouts.
Yeah.
Right? You lost a half season in 94, 95. Right after he took over, you lost a full season, right, in 05, 06, and then you lost a half season in 12, 13. Now you had 3 opportunities of CBA negotiations that have all been met with labor peace. How somebody will view the 04-05 lockout 20 years later is interesting to me, because you don't have the salary cap without that having happened.
Right.
So I bet that if you talk to most owners, they're going to tell you now that it was worth it, losing an entire season. They may not have said that same thing at the time. And when Ron Hainsey was on stage today from a Players Association standpoint and talking about it, he said, look, we've had the salary cap now for 20 years. It's not like that was going to go away.
Right.
So the big crux, it's just a matter now of how do you play? How do you get it done? And when the other crux of the CBA is, it's already a 50-50 split. Right? There's not one side or the other can look at the other one and say, we should, the players can't look and say, we should get more than the owners.
It's not like a baseball negotiation.
The owners shouldn't look and say, well, I guess you could say we should get more than the players, but we're giving you half.
Yeah.
Right? So the negotiations come into the benefits and all those other things. Keep in mind, when this gets ratified, that changes the CBA for 26, 27. We're still going to have one more year of that absolutely idiotic LTIR loophole.
Yep.
Okay. But the good news is, to me, out of all the different pieces and you can rattle through them, Alex, of all the ones you're about to read, to me, I really do feel that the most important one of them, from a fan standpoint, from a competitive standpoint, to me, 100% is getting rid of the LTIR loophole, which I'll make the case. People say, no, it's playing by the rules. It's legal. I'm going to make the case. Yeah, but you know for a fact that Patrick Kane was healthy. You knew for a fact that Kucherov was healthy. You knew for a fact that Stone was healthy.
Yep.
Right? These guys could have played, right? And you knew for a fact that Kane was healthy. Okay? And so, they might have played within the legal loophole of the CBA, right? But the fact that you had healthy guys on IR, absolutely should have been illegal and should have been addressed long ago by the NHL.
Yeah, so some might be saying, well, how are they doing this? So if you missed it, the playoff game rosters for the NHL teams, they have to be cap compliant. So meaning you can go out there and acquire that guy and have him on LTIR so you can add the extra $8-9 million for cap space. But once game one of the playoffs begins, your roster has to be compliant to what the salary cap is at the time.
And here's why I think that is going to be the biggest impact of all the different, well, obviously the schedule is the schedule.
Yeah.
Playing 2 more games is going to be fine.
And it's 2 more games against a division rival too.
I mean, I'm looking at our 9-game preseason schedule for this upcoming year and thinking, thank
9?
God the league may limit it to 4. Okay.
God.
If it gives the league an opportunity to start the season earlier, right? So you're not playing hockey on June 22nd. I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think you just have to accept the fact of the landscape of what it is, and you start playing hockey October 1st. And yes, some of your games are going to end up going up against the World Series. All right. But that's just, I mean, you're a different league.
Yeah.
Okay. But to me, the biggest piece is that LTIR thing. And the reason is, you know, you're the St. Louis Blues. You're Colton Parayko. You're Braden Shen, right? You're in this situation here, Alex, and all of a sudden now you're playing against a team in the postseason that is able to have an $8-9 million player play for them that couldn't play in the regular season because of salary cap purposes. It really is a competitive unfairness. This is going to change it. So when Vegas has Mark Stone on IR again next year towards the trade deadline, which they will, this match, you know, they'll do it to try to get it one more time.
Yeah.
But when they do that, okay, going forward into the first year of this new CBA, okay, you can't go out and grab a Tomas Hertl.
Yeah.
Or you can, but then you're not going to be, then you're going to have to make a decision. Okay, if I'm putting Stone and Hertl in the lineup, who's coming out? The idea that you play an entire regular season with a salary cap and then allow that to not have an impact on the postseason was an unintended, like you could be mean and just say, it's foolish, right? I believe that in the end, it was an unintended consequence of that last CBA. And I'm actually, I mean, you were reading for a while that they may not address
the deal.
this.
Yeah.
I'm thrilled that there was enough. I talked to enough players. I did not talk to one player that said, I like the way it is.
Yeah.
Every player I talked to felt that loophole needed to be closed.
So here's a question that I was asked a couple of days ago on our show, Curbs. Of that cap compliant to play in the playoffs, does that change the excitement of the trade deadline? Because you don't get then those Tomas Hertl deals that nobody saw coming the last second of the deadline.
I still think, no, I don't think it will. Because if you go back to trade deadlines of the past, even trade deadlines in the early part, the first 10 years of the salary cap, I mean, really the first one to really take advantage of this was the Chicago Blackhawks and Patrick Kane.
Yeah.
Okay. To me, it's just going to be a different team getting Hertl. Or they're going to find a way to get themselves cap compliant, right? That to me is how that's going to happen. So I don't think it will. I think it changes the dynamic of it.
So a couple of other ones that I found.
Wait, can I real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
As we're watching, Caleb Denoyer, talk about the, being drafted with the 4th pick by Utah. First off, I'm glad that they have a nickname because it was really hard to call a game going. The Utah Hockey Club has the puck, right? But I believe this, having just watched some of the NBA draft analysis. Quit. Like, if you're going to be doing TV interviews, take the ball cap off. Like, don't give them the ball cap. They're sitting there in a freaking jersey, right? Take the ball cap off so you can see the guy's head.
The problem in the NBA is, we talked about this earlier today, is they're wearing a ball cap of a team that drafted them. They're going to get traded later on that night from a different team that drafted them. So there's there's a draft day picture, and I forget who the reference was, but there's a draft day picture of one guy posing with his team that drafted him. He was traded an hour after that picture was taken.
Put the ball cap on the table next to the young man doing the TV interview, and then when he's done, go ahead and put it on. You get all these pictures of these kids, right, on the draft day, and if one of them happens to be looking down, you can't even see their face. I don't know how nobody has said this.
common sense.
I
Curbs.
don't know how this has, but yeah.
Sometimes you overthink it. The more important thing is making sure you get them in front of a TV screen.
Hey, listen, you mind lifting the brim of your cap? We'd like to see your face.
You were-
Well, we're taking pictures.
You were out there with Montgomery. I don't know if you saw the San Jose one. San Jose, the clock was down to 3 zeros, and nothing was happening. I think they were looking for the person who was presenting the pick. They couldn't find him.
Oh, that could be.
3 minutes later, they came walking out, and I go, I'm going to make a bold prediction now. The decentralized draft will be done after this one.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but let's go.
Yeah, the
back
next
to
one,
the CBA. For
The
people.
contracts. You got contracts limited to 6 years for free agents and 7 years for players that are re-signing with teams. What it is now is it's 8 years to re-sign with your team and 7 years if you're signing as a free agent. I kind of wondered, Curbs, when I saw this one, if teams try and get massive contracts done with their players now so they get that extra year.
I don't think that's going to matter. I like this is an interesting one that I'd like to hear from the PA more when it gets ratified and they're allowed to talk about these, how they felt about this one. First off, the one thing is the Marty Walsh, the executive director of the NHLPA now. He's been on the job 2.5 years. He was the former mayor of Boston.
Yeah.
He said today when somebody said, why a 4-year deal on the CBA? Why not 7-8? Gary Bettman said, I could have handled more. Marty Walsh said, I really like contracts that are in that 4 to 5 range. He said, we had some players that came into the league under the one zone CBA. They leave under the same CBA agreement. He said that he felt that those. So I actually think for the players and all that stuff, this is good. We haven't seen a whole lot of 8-year contracts actually be seen through the 8 years. Most of these 8-year contracts, we've seen somebody traded or bought out anyway.
Right.
Okay. And so without having the numbers right in front of me in terms of how many contracts of 8 years or more, because remember, there was a one point where you could sign a player to more, but how many of those contracts actually were seen through? You're talking Ovechkin, you're talking Crosby, okay?
Superstars
right?
that aren't leaving their team.
Exactly. And so, but you will see far more of those get bought out in years 5 or 6, or years 7 or 8. So, I mean, Trent Frederick just signed an 8-year deal, $3.8 million. I mean, good for him.
Yeah.
Okay, but that is so much changes over that amount of time. I don't think that there's going to be a rush to try to get somebody under contract for 1 extra year, because the reality of it is if the guy's that good, when you typically sign it, and if you look at when most of these guys sign, what Doug Armstrong has done with contracts when it comes to those 7 or 8 year deals, you notice it's taken those guys into like age 30, age 31.
Yeah.
Right. And then somebody else has to sign them. The Tarasenko example might be the best of the bunch. Really might be the best of the bunch. Signed to a long-term contract. Okay. Got him through it and then just said, no, like this one's not worth another 5-year contract. And look what Vladimir's done.
Yeah.
In terms of where he's bounced around to. Look at the David Backes contract.
I was just going to bring up the Backes.
The David Backes contract. When you look at somebody who's becoming that free agent at the age of 31, 32, the Blues said no. That our sweet spot is 3 years, not 4 or 5. In Boston, did Boston sign him for 5?
It was 5. Because
5.
they traded him on the back, or they released or put him through waivers on the back end of it.
And we said, remember, we were on the air and said that will not see year 4.
Yeah,
and it didn't. And so to me, I just don't think that. I don't think that that's going to be a big deal, whatsoever. And now the interesting thing, though, is by taking, and again, when they talk about these or rule changes, whatever, I would challenge fans out there to think of unintended consequences. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If I have a player that signs an 8-year contract, I've now divided that AAV by 1 more year. AAVs are going to go up.
Yeah.
They're not going to pay the player less. It's just going to get divided now in 7 years.
Yep.
And AAV is going to start going up.
And part of the CBA, deferred salary is not going to be allowed anymore. So now there's no more of the, now I know this is the extreme, but what Shohei Ohtani did with the Dodgers, but some players, and I think
Bobby Bonilla, baby.
Yeah, I think Austin Matthews had a little bit of this one, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was Nylander, but you're not going to lower the salary in the early portion of the contract and raise it, or raise it in the early portion and lower it in the back half.
I don't remember seeing I don't remember seeing the deferred money being too much of an issue, coming up. Clearly they saw it as something that could grow.
Yeah.
And clearly what the NHL has seen is Major League Baseball, right?
Yeah.
And how this is going to be a way for teams to afford players. And really what deferred salaries are doing in this case, it's mortgaging your future a little bit. And the league says, no, we don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with them on that.
Well, and how about the e-bug? Bad day for the statue that they bring out from the back when a goalie needs a day off. Bad day for that metal statue to put in net. Now you get the e-bug that's going to permanent job.
You know, it's an interesting thing. Somebody would say, why would a pro sports team not have an extra goaltender, right? And you're bringing in a local cop, a local restaurateur, a local Zamboni driver, whatever it may be. They already changed the rule in the playoffs this year. What was fascinating is Montreal in the playoffs almost had to go to their e-bug.
Yep.
They put a rule in place this year where you didn't have to have an e-bug. You could have, and that's why the Blues traveled with one of their minor league goaltenders. Montreal just decided not to do that. I can't understand.
They basically said we can't go through two goalies in one game.
I can't understand why you wouldn't just out of safety do that if they gave you the rule to do it. So I'll be curious. I don't. That's an added expense for teams. I just don't know that you're going to see teams traveling a third goaltender.
Yeah, because
number one, the goaltenders that are going to matter are the ones in the minor leagues, right? Those are the ones, the Colton Ellises and those guys that are trying to play and work. You want them playing.
Do you keep an East Coast Hockey League, like a fourth or a fifth on the depth chart as that guy?
I mean, are you signing a practice goaltender the same way the Major League Baseball has a bullpen catcher?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay. That might be the way to look at it. Maybe you do. I don't know.
Maybe he has some desk work to do after he's on the ice and takes a couple of laps with the team.
Well, okay. Now here's a fascinating aspect of this. If you have a goaltender like Jordan Binnington, Blues this year felt there were some people that felt that at the beginning of the year got used too much.
Yeah.
Right. But the team was struggling. You had a coach that obviously wanted to prove himself. Okay. All right. He can handle some of that load, but to handle some of that load, you got to make sure maybe that you're not on the ice for a practice day or for a morning skate. But you need two goaltenders out there, the way these morning skates are done and the crispness and all that out there. So I could see it becoming less about the e-bug and more about load management for your goaltenders and still having some kind of quality out there to take shots.
Well, we had a pick. Nashville Predators took Brady Martin at 5th overall. Right now, Charles Barkley is making the 6th overall pick. 59 minutes in, and we've made almost 6 picks. So this draft is going to start flying through this one sooner rather than later. He's Chris Kerber. I'm Alex Ferrario. Maybe once you get past all the celebrity guests in the first portion, it'll go a little faster. But I think every single team has somebody making their announcement.
Have you ever sat at a draft?
Yeah, the Nashville one was the one that we were broadcasting live for.
Boring as hell.
Boring as hell, but you know what I enjoyed about it when you're
if you're not in the middle of it, if you're just sitting there as a fan.
Yeah, okay. You could see the people, you see the general manager stand up and walk to the tables and start negotiating.
Yeah.
I can't see anything with this one.
Yeah, that's going to be a fascinating part. I've been to 3 of them, and unless you get to sit at a table, I'm like, okay. All right.
We were broadcasting for that one in Nashville, and after Dvorsky was picked, we were like, all right, we got nothing else. Let's move to the next one.
When we come back, I've got a kind of a fun story when the draft was here in St. Louis in '96.
Oh, okay.
And I was in town. I came back in town because it was here, and I'll tell you a story about what I did with it.
There we go. Deep tease on that one. Chris Kerber, Alex Ferrario, Grant Francis, Jordan Deacon, NHL Draft Show from Enterprise Center here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. 30 seconds away from pick number 7 as Boston is on the clock. I'm going to be making these jokes for the rest of the night, ladies and gentlemen. So thankfully, we're probably going to have Nikki Glazer at some point, the actual professional comedian. Along with Chris Kerber, I'm Alex Ferrario. We're here at Enterprise Center for the NHL Draft Show. The Blues pick 19th overall tonight, barring some type of trade. Right now, we have yet to see a trade at the NHL Draft. We're live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Also, of course, on the 101 ESPN app. Curbs, I know you're going to have to get up on stage momentarily, but you teased us with the draft story. Take us back to 96.
Okay, so I came into town. I was working in Springfield. I knew the draft was here in St. Louis, so I planned my 1 week's vacation time around it. Came in, and they had at Union Station, they had the Stanley Cup. And it was on display, and there was a huge line for it. So I just walked over to somebody. There was a lot going on at Union Station with it. I grabbed my business card, it said PR director and broadcaster for the Springfield Falcons. And I walked up to just somebody with an NHL badge, introduced myself and said, "Hey, I work in the minor leagues. We're the top affiliate for the Coyotes. I live here in St. Louis. I just happen to be here. Happy to help in any way, shape, or form that you need. You got anything you need done?" And they go, "Actually, I do. Follow me." And they gave me a shirt, white shirt that had the draft logo on it. And they said, "Need you to stand right here and help guide the line." And they put me right next to the Stanley Cup for 4 hours, bringing people into the ropes to take the picture with the Stanley Cup.
It's amazing.
So that's it. And so here I am. I'm kind of at the front of the line helping people, cue them for the next picture at the Stanley Cup at the draft, because I just walked up to somebody and said, "I'd be happy to help. Do you need a runner to just run papers or anything you need?" And they go, "Actually, come here." And they give me a shirt and then put me in the put me right next to the cup
So
for the
kids,
thing.
if you learn anything from that story, is just always go up and ask if you need help with something. You could be standing next to the Stanley Cup.
Well, there was a former minor league broadcaster. Name is Mark Kelly from St. Louis, not related to to John. And he was here, and he was sitting down. And so after I got done doing my duty with the Stanley Cup, after
Stanley Cup handler.
After I got done working, right, I came into the draft and I sat at the down low, and I knew Mark was there, so I found him pre-cell phone texting, found him right, and sitting next to him, and Tom Wheatley had come over to start talking to him, and Tom Wheatley decides to do an article on Mike Kelly as an up-and-coming broadcaster, trying to find his way to the National Hockey League. So they had somebody with a posted paper. "Let's take the picture." So I just leaned right into Mark. I go, "I'm here." And so we took a picture, and it was me and Mark in the stands, right? And I might have said under the caption, 2 up-and-coming broadcasters, but the whole article was about Mark Kelly. So
photobombing.
So I went from working to standing next to the Stanley Cup to talking with him, and ended up in the middle of this Post-Dispatch article about Mark Kelly being an up-and-coming hockey broadcaster.
That was the day that's better known as the day that probably should have never happened for Chris Kerber. Stanley Cup picture in the Post-Dispatch.
Hey, you got to make things happen, don't you?
Absolutely.
You
You
gotta
absolutely
make it happen.
do. I know you're going up there with Brenda to talk about those incredible new jerseys that they came out with. So
Yep.
have fun with that one. I know the
Okay.
season tickets are going to love that.
We'll be back. Where
Curbs
am
will
I?
be back in a little bit. He'll run around the building 5 more times. But as he told you earlier, he had his lobster, so he's good to go. He's got all the carbs that you need in this one. The Boston Bruins just drafted James Higgins, the guy that was rumored to be potentially connected to the New York Islanders. So that goes to show you the Islanders weren't able to get back in to the top half of the draft to get that pick to draft the player that they highly coveted. So right now, you still, once again, have not seen any trades in this first 7 picks. Dragging a little slow right now, but my guess is once you get past 10, you start to see it pick up a little bit as you see teams go a little bit faster with their picks. I will be really curious to find out if there's any trades that happen, though, because for how much rumors that were going around about once you get past the first 4 or 5 picks in this draft, there really wasn't much that was definitively better than what the others were. And that's where it felt like there's potential of teams trading some picks away to get NHL roster players. Can they get roster players from NHL teams? So that's going on about all of that. We'll get to the Central Division here in just a bit, but I did want to read this one. Pierre Lebrun just putting this out. Another interesting tweak in the new CBA on salary retention and trades. a second retention on the same contract can only happen 75 regular season days later. So essentially what that does is it nixes the double retention when you get a third team involved. So say one team, because the max you can eat is 50%, one team eats 50%, the third team eats 25%, and that team that's acquiring the player is 75% off of that player. Essentially, those can't happen anymore. So there's no more 3-team deals that are eating multiple salary retentions for the player. That's massive in terms of it. You could tell the NHL's trying to find ways to eliminate those loopholes that teams were working on, right? Teams were working on those loopholes to add the players so that they can bring back a super team for the postseason with LTIR, trying to take away the deferred money so that the salary wasn't as high for owners so that they could bring those players in. And then in this one, you take those 3 teams, the middlemans out that are eating salary so that they can keep somebody for a lot cheaper than what he's worth. I applaud the NHL for that. I know some people are worried that it takes some of the competitiveness away from the conversation, what happens in that front. But overall, I think it's going to make the game a little bit more intriguing. Like, yes, maybe the trade deadline isn't as active. Maybe teams aren't willing to go crazy at that deadline to bring in as much talent as possible. But I also think what it does is it puts more teams out there that can realistically acquire a player versus, hey, there's only 3 or 4 teams that can do this, and you're not going to see the guy get moved, and then it's a boring deadline. So kind of my rant on this CBA that they're putting together, which really sounds pretty intriguing for the National Hockey League. Grant, we teased it in the last hour. Let's get back into this a little bit because you mentioned the Central Division just finding ways to improve. Now, they didn't acquire those NHL players like we thought. You know, for a little bit there, I thought Matt Barzal was going to go to the Utah Hockey Club, the Utah Mammoth, or I thought he was going to go to the Nashville Predators because that's how desperate they were to get into the top 5 to draft James Higgins. It doesn't happen, but we've seen Utah get J.J. Peterka a couple of days ago. Nashville, for some odd reason, thinks they're going to be competitive this year for how bad they were last year. Dallas has been connected to Mitch Marner. The one thing that has remained steadfast every single season is that the Central Division remains one of the toughest divisions to win at in the National Hockey League, which is why I find this offseason so fascinating for the Blues because they've got decisions that needed to be made. I don't know how aggressive they're acting that they have to be at this deadline, this offseason. But when you watch all these other teams that weren't playoff teams last year that are trying to be playoff teams this year, it does create a little bit more intrigue of what you're going to do versus some of these Central teams.
Yeah, and I just think about, the Blues' path to where they sit in the playoffs and getting back to the playoffs. And you think about Winnipeg, who just won the President's Trophy this past season. And then you think about Dallas, who was just in the conference finals. Minnesota, who for a lot of the start of the season last year was at the top of the league. I think at one point they were in the number 1 spot in the league over Winnipeg early on before Kaprizov got hurt. And then you have Colorado, obviously, which we all know what Colorado is capable of. So you got 4 teams right there before you even get to the Blues. And, you could definitely see a situation where the Blues finish 5th in the Central Division in this upcoming season, and you could see them potentially getting close to or at 100 points, and that's still being the case. I was talking to a couple of people the other day, texting with them and just saying, I think the Blues, if they're in a different division, I think if the Blues are in, for example, like the Metropolitan Division, I think they could win that division right now. At the same time, I think they could finish 5th in the Central, which is a wild thing to say. And, I really started thinking about this when Utah made that trade for J.J. Peterka. And obviously Utah is getting a lot more aggressive trying to improve their roster and get back to the playoffs. But, I mean, you're right there with Utah. If Utah continues to improve, I mean, you're talking about a 6-team race in the Central to where it's a real toss-up towards the bottom of that bottom half of the division. And obviously, they're not there yet, but Chicago just keeps compiling these high draft picks, and they're not going to be awful for too much longer. You think within the next 3 or 4 years, they figure at least something out to where they're somewhat competitive. And then, Nashville and all the players that they have. So it's just it's an interesting division because from top to bottom, you see a path for every single team to where they're going to be competitive at some point if they're already not right now. And it's really just a state of keeping up right now in the Central Division.
Well, what's wild about that too, Grant, like it's a phenomenal point. Like you're fighting for 6th in the Central, but Add in the Pacific Division. Now, you've got Vegas, you've got Edmonton, and you have LA. Like, those three teams you don't expect to be going anywhere. But Anaheim goes out there and brings in Joel Quenneville, which I agree with what Doug Armstrong told us on Monday. You don't go out there to bring in a Hall of Fame caliber coach unless you think you can compete this year. They also just traded away Trevor Zegras for pennies on the dollar because he didn't match the identity of what that Ducks team wants to be. Now, I've seen all of the rumors out there that say, hey, the Ducks are going to be in on, Nikolai Ehlers or Brock Besser or Mitch Marner. They're going to be in on all of these guys. They're going to be in on all of these trades. So add in the Ducks to that conversation. I don't think Vancouver's going to be any good, but Vancouver goes out there and gets Evander Kane. Like, you've got Seattle has made some moves, and they just selected a forward with the 8th overall pick. When Doug talked about how, the goal is to always improve by 5 to 10%, and where you finished last year, you finished as the 8th place team in the Western Conference. And he said, we hope we're closer to 6 rather than 10 for this upcoming season. That's because there are 10 teams that believe they should be in the playoffs next year, which is why this offseason to me is so fascinating. I've been asked so many times, is it a disappointment? Is it a failure if the Blues return with the same roster that they ended last season with? And my answer has remained steadfast. No, it's not. You're bringing back a team that played, 4 months with Jim Montgomery, and you saw the impact that he had. Now you have a full training camp. Now you have a full preseason. Now you have a full season with Jim Montgomery. You have a full season of Jimmy Snuggerud. You have hopefully a full season of Dylan Holloway and Zach Bolduc being healthy. You've got a full season of Cam Fowler, of Thomas and Broberg being healthy. I don't think it's a bad thing to come back with the same roster. I do think that the state of the Central Division and the Western Conference remains to be competitive, that if you return with the same roster, you are playing craps with the fact of, hey, you might be a 95-point team, which is 6 points away from a playoff spot, versus being a 100-point team that's sitting in one of those wild card spots, or maybe the third place spot in the Central Division.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And one team we didn't even mention, speaking of teams that are in that same category as the Blackhawks right now, the San Jose Sharks, I don't think are going to be awful for too much longer. Like the amount of players, the good players that they have, gotten over the last few years with Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. They just drafted Michael Misa tonight. Like, I think give it 3 years, it's not going to be this upcoming year for sure, and probably not the year after that, but 3 years, I think the Sharks and the Blackhawks are going to be right there in terms of really competing for top 3 in their divisions. So, I mean, when the Blues are also in this conversation of climbing back up into the top 3 of the divisions, it's really difficult right now. And I don't know if Alex, if this is just prisoner of the moment for me, but I feel like right now there's so much parity, like so much more parity than I've ever witnessed in the Western Conference specifically. Like, you could see so many different things happen and you wouldn't really be surprised. Like, I think there could be 4 different teams that could win the Central Division this year, and I wouldn't be surprised by it.
The Buffalo Sabres are now on the clock. I would say that if you're wanting to see some type of trade in the draft, taking away the back end of the draft that gets traded away for extra picks, for a trade that actually could make some noise, this is it right here. Like Kerb's mentioned, like, when does Buffalo pick? 9th overall. This is the pick. They got about 90 seconds before the pick should be in. They've been connected to everything. They've been connected to the teams that were in on Noah Dobson. Bo Byram's been out there. They've already traded Peterka. Buffalo's the one that I'm watching, because Buffalo, no draft pick is going to make that team any better. Like, you either trade that pick for an NHL roster player, or you hope that you find a diamond in the rough with this one. But 9th overall pick, I'd say keep a close eye on. So that leads me to my tease. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll find out what happens with that 9th overall pick. Kerbs will be back with us as well. Grant Francis, we got Jordan Deacon, we've got Doty. I'm Alex Ferrario. It is the NHL Draft Show. We are here at Enterprise Center for the NHL Draft Round 1. We're 10 picks away from the Blues pick, and we'll come back after this here on 101 ESPN.
I'm Dr.
ESPN.
Everyone's waiting on pins and needles, right? The 9th overall pick, it could get traded. Nope, it didn't. Buffalo is going to go for their 15th consecutive season of missing the playoffs. They take the big defenseman, which I was excited about until I found out that he was going top 10. Radim Murtka. Everybody that's listening, listens to BK and Ferrario knows I love me some Mongoons. That's how I would describe this individual player. I think he's like 6'5", 230 pounds. He's been playing over in the European League, and this is just a monster of a man. So he's going to the Buffalo Sabres. And then on top of all of this, maybe Grant can get to use the breaking news emoji at some point, because Jordan Deacon, who's working all of the breaking news sounders on the other side too, said that Kevin Weeks, we all love Kevin Weeks, right? Those Weeksy bombs that he decides to drop, just tweeted out the eye emoji and a picture of what we believe is Denver. Grant's absolutely correct. It is just mountains and a couple of buildings. So it could be Utah. Who knows? Could be San Jose. There's no mountains in San Jose probably, right? I don't know. I've never been to California.
I can confirm it's Denver.
Okay. Grant did the legwork on this one. It's Denver. And then Spittin' Chicklets tweets out what Georges Laraque had put out there saying, I do believe Sidney Crosby is going to be playing elsewhere. And then Spittin' Chicklets quote tweets Kevin Weeks and says, Sid, question mark to Denver? I promise if Sidney Crosby gets traded to Colorado, we're ending this show early. Like what? Like, come on, man. It would make sense, right? They just traded away Charlie Coyle. They opened up cap space for a team that never has any cap space available to them. I don't know. It's the breaking news stuff. But what we do know is Buffalo's going to miss the playoffs once again and take another first-round draft pick. All right, enough of me making fun of them. Chris Kerber will be back with us in a bit. It is the NHL Draft Show, by the way, if you're just joining us. We are here at Enterprise Center. I'm Alex Ferrario. Grant Francis, our producer extraordinaire, is back in our studios. Jordan Deacon is here. Doty is taking care of us here on the engineering side. Chris Kerber is up on the big stage right now talking to the season ticket holders. We are now 10 picks through, or almost 10 picks through for the draft, which means the Blues are less than 10 picks away from making their selection, potentially, unless there's some type of move, which, by the way, there have been 0 moves thus far in the NHL draft. Speaking of that, I wanted to dive into some quotes from Doug Armstrong. He met with the assembled media on Monday to just do a pre-draft roundup session, answering any questions before the draft, before the NHL offseason, which free agency picks up on July 1st. And I wanted to play through some of these cuts and just kind of go back and forth with them. Let's start with this one. Doug Armstrong on his experience at the draft.
Yarmo and Tony both came in with a lot of experience doing it. They had run drafts before. They were Billy took over from an assistant to the main role, so there was a little bit of getting to know him and know how he operates, how he thinks. It's always different when you're working with someone as an assistant or in a different role and they take a different responsibility. It was getting that rhythm. We seem to do it very quickly on what he likes in players, what he looks for in players. I've been fortunate with the group here is that they're very open to dialogue, lots of poking and prodding. They don't, I think our job is to, since we don't know the players when they're getting drafted, we hear them describe players and then they say, okay, that sounds like this player that we talked about
just
a year
popped
ago,
up
or 2 years ago, or 3
Yeah,
years
no,
ago, or 6
Seattle,
years ago.
yeah, Seattle was down to
Because
0.
what we're trying to do, or what I try and do as a manager, is just paint a picture, get a picture in my mind of who that player
I
is
swear,
and what
dude,
he
if
looks
they
like
trade,
and what he's gonna, how they view him moving forward. And Tony, who I work with now, has done this for hundreds of years. So he's easy to work with and it's very seamless with him.
Yeah, so Doug talking just about the whole draft process and the people that he's worked with. The other quote that he had that I found so fascinating was just talking about the impact of these draft picks. When they come and help the team out, he said, typically when you pick in this position, you're talking 4 to 5 years, which really checks out. If you think about what was it? It was 21, if I'm not mistaken, Grant. That was when Jimmy Snuggerud was drafted, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So Jimmy Snuggerud drafted 22 was when he was drafted. So there's your 4 years for you. The 21 draft was Zach Bolduc. So there's those 21 years are the 4 years in between the draft picks and when they impact your club. So that's really where it happens in terms of seeing those players come to where they're at. But you always kind of go into the draft, and at least from a fan perspective, I do this sometimes, where you look at the stockpiling of players and you say, okay, where is this team heavy? Where are they light? What area of need do you think they address? And Doug Armstrong talked a little bit about that.
Well, I think we've tried the last couple of drafts. We drafted a centerman, a right shot D with our first picks. I think we're D. One thing that hasn't really changed is how you build a team is through the middle of the ice. Centerman, D, goalie. Wingers are extremely important, but they seem to move around quicker and or become more available than centerman or D. But you don't want to take a half letter or full letter grade lesser player just because of the positional need, because the positional need changes, especially at 19. At 19, you're hoping that this player can make an impact on your team in 4 years. He might pop his head in to a game or two in 3 years. That's just the way picks 19 go. If they're playing, in the second or third year, it usually means your team isn't performing well, or the guy is just better than advertised. And we had that with Robert Thomas, but we don't count on that. Every year is getting a player that should play, in his second year after the draft. I think since I've been here, we've had 2 players play. I don't have any player to play their first year after draft. We've had 2 players play their second full time, and that was Fabry and Thomas. Other than that, so you're looking at 3 or 4 years before this year's draft guys are going to make a difference. When you look at what we did 2 years ago, it seems like an eternity ago, trading O'Reilly and Barbashev and Mikula and those guys to get those 3 first rounders and extra second round picks. And quite honestly, those guys are just turning pro now. And I'm not expecting them to come in and make a difference. So when you look at it like that, you are looking out multiple years at an 18-year-old draft.
So long-winded answer there, but you can kind of see the trajectory in terms of where the team expects this player to help the club at, which is why you don't see picks get traded that often. We can talk about it, the chaos that you want to see in a draft. You hope it happens, but most of the time it doesn't, because when you're drafting in the top 10, you'd expect those guys to help you probably 2 years from now. And then once you get to the middle round, you're hoping 3-4 years from now, as Doug mentioned. And then later you're talking 5, but those teams don't really care as much about that. You stockpile what you need in your minor league system. And, if you missed it earlier today, I had my Ferrario 5 talking about the 5 players that I think the Blues could select at 19 overall. There was 1 winger, a lot of defensemen, and 1 centerman. And really it's because all the centermen expected to go are towards the top, but it does really feel as if the Blues are making that pick, which we don't know. Things could happen between now and 19 overall, which Anaheim just selected theirs 10th overall. It does feel like right-handed shot defenseman might be the area of strength available still once the Blues pick there. There's a centerman, Kolreshny, that I've seen on a lot of mock drafts for the Blues that might make some sense for this team if he's there still. The question is if he's going to be there still, but you don't expect these picks to really help your team for at least 3 to 4 years. 1 more on a draft pick and the optimism of trading that first round pick. This was Doug Armstrong's answer.
It's definitely in consideration. Yes. But it's always in consideration. What I don't think we're going to do is deviate from our course of trying to build within a group of players that, let's say, are 20 or 21 now and 25. That's sort of that window that we're trying to input players into. I think we could trade for 19 for a player that's 1 year away from UFA, and then hope you can sign them. But if you can't sign them, then you have a player 1 year away from UFA that this is the sort of the dynamic. So let's say you trade for a player that is that player thinking, I'll trade him at the deadline, and I'll recoup that plus something. And then you get to the deadline and you're having a good year. And you say, well, we can't trade him now. We'll rip the room apart. And then he walks away a year from now and people say, well, why would you have done that? So we're not going to have to wait for the second guessing, we're going to stop it now. We won't be trading for a guy with 1 year left unless we know 100% that we can get him signed, or 2 years, quite honestly.
So there you go. That's Doug Armstrong's media availability on Monday. Let's take a break. The Anaheim Ducks just made their selection, Roger McQueen. So we're at pick number 11. Blues selecting 19th overall. We'll take a break. We'll come back for more here on the NHL Draft Show here on 101 ESPN.
In the
ESPN.
Welcome back into the NHL Draft Show here live from Enterprise Center, along with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. I'm Alex Ferrario, Grant Francis, Jordan Deacon along as well, Doty here, the whole team bringing you live draft coverage here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN as the Pittsburgh Penguins are on the clock. And Curbs, we were just talking about this in the previous segment. The Kevin Weeks bomb took place a little bit ago. He just tweeted out a picture of Denver skyline and then just tweeted out an eye emoji. And now everybody's talking about Sidney Crosby potentially getting traded to Colorado.
Yeah, but just a couple minutes ago, and you got to be careful with this. And you know, this is the challenge. Like I mean, other than just starting to try to start a fire. Rob Rossi, who's a senior writer with The Athletic.
Yeah.
Right. Rob Rossi just put out about 10 minutes ago that says, for what it's worth, just spoke with someone who would know, with a cough emoji, right? Anything you read this weekend about Sidney Crosby leaving the Penguins is, in the words of this person, a joke. And this person of all persons would know. He'd know before anybody.
Cool. So we
Okay.
talked to Sidney Crosby.
So right, so there's no way that Rob Rossi is putting that out there unless he talks. Right?
Cool.
To,
You don't think he's referencing Kyle Dubas has told him no, we're not trading him. Yeah, and
you know what I'd like to do? I want to go back and I'm kind of joke. I was sort of joking about it a little bit in one sense, but I want to go back to the Buffalo Sabres here for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, and to me, wow, the Pittsburgh Penguins have an elevator right in the middle of the room. Well, on the wall, whatever draft room. You can tell that it's different than the way the NFL had been used to doing things for years. To me, listen, this night for me and ADHD is all over the place, brother.
No. We started with lobster, and I was like, we are off and
we're
running,
off and
ladies
running.
and gentlemen.
So, you look at the Buffalo Sabres draft picks, and you're going, how have they just not been able to put it together? Because they've had first overall picks. They've had second overall picks. I think the J.J. Paterka trade is a good one for them. I think it's meaningful. I think they bring in, a defenseman that's got a little grit, a little nastiness to him, but they really weren't able to change their identity over the last few years. But for me, I got to be honest with you. I don't understand how the Buffalo Sabres, truthfully, even used that pick. The players, Doug Armstrong referenced this with us, and I think this is when we talked a little bit a while ago about how things changing how you build your team, right?
Yeah. Unless
you're picking top 5, and even then, there could be there's examples of this, but unless you're picking top 5, the chances of that player impacting you within the 2 to 3 year window are not great. So look even at Dalibor Dvorsky, drafted 2 years ago, made his NHL debut, but they're not sure he's going to be an impactful player. They're not counting on it, at least, right?
Yeah.
And that's fair. They're not putting that pressure on him. Okay, so maybe he gets more games this year. Okay, maybe he comes out and lights it up, but that typically doesn't happen. Look at Robert Thomas, where he is finally merging into himself right now as a number 1 center. Right, his first 3 years in the league, they didn't play him at center.
Yeah,
he was learning under Tyler Bozak, right? So the sorry, getting hand signals about a guest coming in.
Curbs is doing like 7 different things. So,
but the reason I bring that up is because you look at a middle round player, what Jake Neighbors did, right? Is what Jake Neighbors has done. It's still his 3rd year, and then you grow from there. Buffalo doesn't need another top 10 pick. They really don't. Yep. They've had enough.
That's what I told Grant.
Okay. Truthfully, if there was ever a team where trading your top 10 pick, right, was really important to probably advance getting better, that was the team that had to do it, right? It's the Buffalo Sabres that somehow should have found their way in on Noah Dobson. It's the Buffalo Sabres that should have found their way and still might. And look, they could trade that player.
Right.
Okay. But the reality of it is, Alex, is there that's one to me that is just kind of fascinating how I just don't understand why at this point they're using that pick. Well, there's got to be a player out there that you could trade the 9th overall pick to get somebody to help your team and get some more veteran players in there to bring the young guys along. They're making the same mistake year in, year out that Edmonton made, and it's something else to me. Eventually, at some point in time, the futility of the Buffalo Sabres and this retool, rebuild, whatever it is, I think you study it as a general manager because it's amazing. I mean, Anaheim's getting dangerously close to going down that path. San Jose is as well. I mean, you just gotta find a way to. Who's done that? The Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah.
The Columbus Blue Jackets have made the playoffs 3 or 4 years in their entire history. They kept the prospects too long.
Yeah.
Trade them for players.
Yeah.
Get them going there.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. We're going to have a live guest hop on with us now. Chris Kerber, Alex Ferrario at the NHL Draft Show. And the individual who will be saying the name at 19 overall. Nikki Glazer is with us here.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm so good.
You excited?
I am. I'm caught up in the moment. I don't know what any of this really means, but people who I love are very excited for me to be here, and it's rubbing off on me.
It is exciting to have you.
Yeah.
First off, very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Finally, person watching you for so long, and then listening to the interviews, especially you popping on the Riz show with those guys and stuff, having a great time with them. How cool was it for you? Or what was it like when they said, "Hey, we got this kind of idea. We kind of want you to come down to an ice rink, a big arena that doesn't have ice in it at the moment.
Yeah.
And we want you to say the name of some 18-year-old kid that's going to be a future Blue."
I mean, it was so exciting because, I grew up in St. Louis. I still live here now. And so it just means a lot to get that kind of recognition where I would be asked to do that and represent the city in this way. It's the reason I do comedy. It's the reason I ever wanted to be on TV is like, will people see me? Can I just, you're not really looking for the nation to accept you. You're looking for your hometown. That's like what every celebrity is like after, is that like they weren't seen in high school. They weren't seen in middle school. They just want people to go like, oh, I know who just the people at home matter more than anyone else. So like this kind of thing matters to me more than most things that I do. It's just like feeling the hometown love, even though I'm not very well versed in the Blues. Like I understand the enormity of it to our city. So I'm extremely like grateful that I got asked. It's cool.
It's exciting. It's exciting to have you here. When did you finally realize I can do this from a comedian standpoint?
I probably like 5 months ago. I don't know. I think it was probably when I was like 18. I did it for the first time when I was a freshman at college, and it was really the first thing I ever did that I was like, well, I think I'm kind of good at this. I just never been really good at anything naturally. I would try so many different things, different ways to perform, and I was always just like the worst at it. And I thought, I want to have a knack for something. I want someone to go, hey, you keep doing this. And it was kind of the first thing that I ever did that someone goes, you have a shot at this. And that's all I kind of needed. So it's really a lesson in telling kids or young people, like, just if you see talent somewhere, calling it out, like if you see even like a little, just a glimmer of it, because it was only someone saying to me like, hey, you're better than most people at this, that I was even like, really? And kept doing it. If I wouldn't have gotten that feedback, I probably wouldn't keep doing it. But it just felt amazing being on stage, getting laughs. It was just the best feeling in the world. And I just kept chasing it.
That's what I was going to ask, Nikki. Is it the laughs after you walk off stage that first time where you're like, okay, something clicked there? Or is it the people that are telling you what you're doing on stage is working?
It's that first laugh you get when you're on stage of like, they like me. They really like me. And it's also such a freeing thing of comedy is saying things that you really probably wouldn't even write in your diary a lot of times, that you wouldn't even tell your closest friends. But for some reason, when you say them into a microphone in front of thousands of people, it makes you famous. It's just this weird, it's just so strange. The things I'm talking about on stage now were things that I thought, oh, I'm never going to tell anyone this. And it's just nice to be able to like almost weaponize them in this way where it's like, I thought they were the worst thing about me. And now they're, buying me a house. So it's really cool.
Are comedians back? And what I mean by that is the comfort back now where you can really be cracking some jokes?
Yeah, I don't think for me, it never left, because I was never really scared of getting canceled, because I always just thought, if I offend someone, or if I really cause someone enough discomfort that they have to leave my show, or that they feel like they were crying on their couch watching me on TV, or that I scandalized them in front of their kids, like, I'll apologize. I'll feel bad about that. I'll change what I'm doing. But it's just, I think that most people only really get upset about things to get attention, and they don't really want you to apologize or to change your ways. They just want to be mad. And so when I'm met with just any kind of backlash, I'm generally kind of receptive to it and say, oh, actually, I did have a bad take. And by the way, I'm not that smart. Like, I'm not a politician. I'm not changing laws. Like, me talking to a microphone, telling jokes, people really, I should be wrong. I'm wrong a lot of the time. So I'm not a preacher, it should all be taken with a grain of salt. So I think when people get upset about something I say or have an opinion about, I just go, okay, well, we disagree. I'm not doing anything up. This isn't changing the way anyone sees anything. I'm just trying to make people laugh. So I'll admit I'm wrong all the time, or admit that I went too far. I mean, I say jokes on stage now that I go, I want to leave my own show. I can't believe I just said that. Like I watch, roast clips sometimes, and I go, they'll come across my Instagram and I go, oh, let me just see what I got up to this time, 6 years ago. I'm like, good Lord, why would you say that to someone? Like, I don't even relate to the person that I can become when I get a microphone in front of me.
So just out of curiosity, when they called you and asked you to be a part of the roast of Tom Brady,
Yeah.
was your creative writing process a quick one on that one, or did it take you a little bit of time?
I got right to work. I really fought for the Tom Brady roast. I heard that he was announced as the next guy we were going to roast. And it had been a while since we had a roast. We went through the whole pandemic, and so I wrote the head of Netflix, who I'm buddies with, the comedy guy at Netflix, and I said, hey, I saw this roast is announced. I would love to do it. And he's like, I'm actually going to meet with Tom today to talk about stuff. Obviously you're in the mix of names we're talking about. And I said, you tell Tom Brady I'm the Tom Brady of roasting. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time, because I'm the guy. I don't usually have that kind of confidence, but there are these moments where I just get overwhelmed and I'm just on my phone and I just shot that off. And I was like, I don't know what that's going to do. But I also thought, you know what? That'll resonate with Tom Brady. I was thinking, if I were Tom Brady going into this, wouldn't I want the best people on it? And wouldn't I want someone who identifies as the best by saying my name? And it worked, and I think I would have gotten it anyway, but I think that kind of moved the needle a little bit. And then I just got right to work of research, I wasn't a huge football fan before. I read all his books. I read everything about it, watched all the documentaries, and you just need to learn someone and have an opinion about them. Cause I really didn't know much about him outside of, what Us Weekly tells us. So I had to really,
the fact that he cheated at football. It was really
that's a St. Louis fan right there.
Yes, exactly. I didn't know much. And so once I got to, you just want an opinion about someone. And so once I had one, I had a solid place to start writing jokes from.
Do you rattle those roast jokes off of other comedians, or I know you try to keep them secretive before that roast happens?
Oh, it's a huge rehearsal process. I was going out to clubs. I probably ran that set, 75, 100 times just around town. And word does get out and you don't want the other roasters to see you. So it's kind of we all agree, we're all at the clubs at the same time, kind of practicing. So we all agree, not to sit in the room when the other comic is on the stage. Cause you do want to know what other people are talking about, because you don't want to do the same jokes, but there's people producing the show that kind of look out for any repetition. So, I was out all the time just putting it together, because that's what you got to do. I mean, it's such a gamble at those shows, because even if you toast it out of the Comedy Store 100 times, you don't know what it's going to be like at the Kia Center live on Netflix. There were so many factors that weren't even at play in other roasts I've done. They'd all been pre-tapes. So if a joke doesn't go well, you can do a joke that sometimes does an A, but is maybe 1 or 2 times a C, because it might be an A that night. And if it's a C, you can just take it out and they can always beef up the laughter. I'm not telling them to do this, but this is what the edit process is. And so, but on that Tom Brady one, I was like, this is live. I can't have any jokes that aren't A+. The whole thing has to be tight. Wow. So it was a tightrope walk. It was one of the best nights of my life, but honestly one of the scariest. And the relief when I was done, just plopping back down on that couch. You can watch and I just sit down the weight of the world off my shoulders. It was great.
Hey, congratulations on the success of Someday You'll Die.
Oh, thank you.
That's exciting. It's fun. Do we still call them albums?
Yeah, well,
how do you refer
specials,
to it? Okay, specials. So we'll call it specials. Okay, all right. Because no, listen. I used to have.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a question that I don't know that you've been asked before. Am I still allowed to laugh at Bill Cosby jokes?
I think so. I mean, I do.
Because I had a Bill Cosby album at home. Bill Cosby himself. It's one of the greatest comedy albums of all time. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. Well, I don't even know if I can put it on the record player anymore.
I didn't really laugh at Bill Cosby even before all the allegations. But if you did, I don't know. I still listen to Michael Jackson or Chris Brown. You can't I can kind of separate the artist from the art from the artist sometimes. Right. Bill Cosby's a tough one though. Comedians are more tough to me. Not as much Bill Cosby, but when a comedian comes out as being kind of totally different than the brand that they were selling, it takes something away from it, because musicians are kind of they're not always just truth tellers. They're kind of playing a character. They're speaking in metaphor. But when you're watching someone who's up there and is bearing their soul and is this truth teller who's the only one that's going to tell you the truth. Comedians are supposed to be honest to a fault. And so when a comedian comes out as someone who is totally different than the person they present, it's not that I'm I'm not going to listen anymore because I want to punish them. I'm just I just don't really care. I don't trust you anymore. It takes something away from the honesty of it.
It's funny. It does.
Yeah.
So what was the process of putting Someday You'll Die together? What was it like for you?
I mean, it was just, putting together a tour and then just running I'm right now I'm in the middle of the tour doing the same thing. So you always tape a special at the end of like a really long tour. I just got done with 105 shows since January. This is my first Friday, and I live in St. Louis, but it's my first Friday in St. Louis since January.
Wow.
And so I've been on the road every single weekend, just doing show after show. And you just modify the set every night and try different jokes and take out things and change the order. And then by, the fall, when I hopefully take my next special, it's just in a place where I'm feel good enough to put it out there. It's never done. You're always like, oh, it could be better if I had one more month. So it's constantly evolving. But, the day you tape the special, it's just like, okay, this is the best I had that night. And sometimes you write a joke that morning and shove it in and or write something on stage, something happens. So it's, but it's just a process of, what do I want to say right now? Like, what's important to me? What would I want to hear? Or what do I think people want to hear? And what have I not said before? It's kind of thinking about those things right now.
Why'd you move home?
I moved home during COVID because I was just like, I was living in New York at the time. I was like, I don't want to be here. This is scary. And I love my parents. And I was like, I just want to move back home. I was 35 and I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have anything really like to live with. So I was like, I'll just move back in with my parents. It'll be like a week or two, this thing will blow over. And then it was a year of living with my parents and they were like, you got to get out of here. Like I was just chilling back in my childhood bedroom, having the best time off the road, like no comedy to do, just kind of like enjoying it. I kind of missed that vacation, and then I moved out and I just was like, I'll just get an apartment in St. Louis. It was kind of, I started touring, midway through 2020 and doing like outdoor shows. And so I was like, it's actually pretty easy to fly out of St. Louis to get to some of these cities, not going all across the country. And so I was like, I like Southwest, priority boarding, A15.
Gotta start paying for your bags now.
I know,
well, you fly enough that
I heard
you
it.
won't, but yeah.
No, you're going to start getting assigned seating at Southwest. It's all changing.
It's
but
wild. I never minded the cattle call.
No, I like it. I don't mind it either. I like
mind
having kind of, you can do whatever you want on there. But I just stayed and then I just like it here. I just feel like I don't feel, not that I was feeling like, oh, I can't go anywhere on the coast or something, but just no one here is that impressed. I mean, everyone's happy about what I do and is like, oh, it's cool that you're here, but no one's like, whoa, you're a celebrity. Like no one cares about that stuff here as much. And it's kind of refreshing to me. Like people are impressed by what I do, but it's not like I don't get treated differently. And so I don't walk around feeling like I'm anyone. I forget that I'm on TV all the time. Like I've never walked into a place being like, is anyone going to recognize me? That's just the way it feels here. And I think it's helpful to keep me humble because I've seen fame corrupt a lot of my friends who I've met before they were famous. And I've just been I just don't want to get that way. I don't want to think I'm cooler than other people. I don't want to think that because I found a way to, rig the system in this showbiz world that, I mean, really, it's just luck or whatever that I think that, I don't know. I want to set it up so that I keep people around me who keep me humble. And even that sounds pretentious to say, but I just feel it here. I just don't feel any different here. I like the way I feel here. And that's odd for me because when I was in high school, all I wanted to be was famous. And I wanted to go to restaurants and have everyone whispering, is that Nikki Glazer? Like that could not be further from what I want now at all. It's always nice when it happens, when people come up and ask for pictures. Like I love it. I'm always like, if someone DMs me and says, I saw you, but I was too scared. I'm like, please, like it always makes me feel amazing, but I don't feel like, I just don't, and my goals here are different. Like I come from New York and LA after spending a couple weeks there, and I'm kind of wrapped up in how I look and how many followers I have and the likes and the views and the BS. And then I come back here and that's not how we rate people around here. We rate you by where you went to high school and how much money your parents have. And so
if you like toasted ravioli and Provel cheese or not.
And you're sitting there going, yeah, when I'm 35 years old, still living with mom and dad.
It just reminds me of what I really love about life. And it's nice to have all this success in this way, but I have no desire to move back there.
I'll tell you this, it's not luck because during COVID, that was when I started to you dive into all these Netflix specials and things like that. I loved when you came back home because it was cool to watch on Instagram, you being around the family and living at home. My wife, who doesn't laugh at comedians very often, just dove into Nikki Glazer stand-ups, and so her and I watch them a lot.
Oh, that's so
it's
nice.
talent, let me tell you, because my wife doesn't laugh at comedians very often.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah. Oh, shout out to her. That's so sweet.
Yeah.
That's great.
I know we got to let you go, Nikki, because you got tons of stuff going on.
Yeah, we're going to go on stage and introduce her to the fans here, our season ticket holders that are here. when I went out there and welcomed everybody, the season ticket holders, I kind of did, okay, how many of you were first-year season ticket holders last year? And like 10 or so were there. Went all the way. There's a handful of people that are here that have been season ticket holders since day one in 1967.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it's really cool thing. So we don't care whether or not somebody is deeply entrenched, into the St. Louis Blues and could tell us the skate size of all three Plager brothers. Okay, that part doesn't matter. What matters to us is that you're here and having fun with it. And keep moving forward through the fun that this team is doing right now. So it's going to be great having you games and repping that Blue Note with us and just coming as a fan and having fun. So
that is the exact same way I feel as a Swiftie. People are always like, I don't really listen. I don't know a lot. I'm like, we're happy to have you. Like, there's no judgment. Whatever you know, like, come in and enjoy it. So
big Swiftie, right?
Right?
Big
His eyes lit up.
Oh, yeah, exactly what you were talking about.
I know that. Well, the Swiftie we have at home is about this big. I got to put it all around the floor. No, I have a daughter that's dad jokes.
I loved it.
All right, well, let's
thank
go.
you guys
Nikki,
so much. Thanks for having me. This is real fun.
We'll take a break on the NHL Draft Show. Come back for more next year on 101 ESPN.
We're home for Blues Hockey 101 ESPN.
Once again, appreciate Nikki Glazer hopping on with us. That was really fun getting to sit down with her. She's going to be making the pick for the Blues coming up in 5 picks from now, number 19. As we were on the air, of course, Grant, he had this big breaking news sounder. He was ready for some chaos and some action. And then the moment Nikki Glazer steps on with us, that's when the trade took place. So if you're just joining us or if you're with us and I didn't update you, here's what took place. The Pittsburgh Penguins were picking at number 11 in the NHL draft. No, number 12 in that draft. They took Benjamin Kindell at number 11, and then they had the 12th overall pick. That one was traded to the Philadelphia Flyers for the 22nd overall pick and the 31st overall pick. Jordan Deacon's giving me the green light on that one. So those two picks were traded for number 12, which Philadelphia moves up into. And so Jack Nesbitt is the one that gets selected by Philadelphia. So now we are at the 13th pick, which is the Columbus Blue Jackets, and just our 14th pick, I should say, because Philadelphia just selected that one. I will say, though, not because I'm no prospect guru on this one, but I will say that a lot of the guys, at least that were projected to go earlier before the Blues in the 19th overall pick, a lot of them are still available on the draft board, with the Blues being 5 picks away. So we'll
see that. Now that's an interesting topic.
It is.
Okay, to me on a draft day, because this, and it goes to exactly what Ryan Miller, the Blues assistant general manager, was talking about with us when they were when he was up on stage with us in front of the season ticket holders. When he said there's a pretty clear-cut number one, but that whole grouping behind that's going to come down to who values what. What I think we saw 7 centers go in the top 10, out of the top 10.
Yeah.
And is that much of a surprise, Alex, when you and BK and Tanner are doing your shows, right? It seems like every single team right now is sitting here looking for a second line center.
Yep.
Okay. But it takes time to go ahead and figure that out. So to me, what'll be fascinating is after the Blues make their pick, it will be to find out from Doug when he meets the media, or find out from Ryan or somebody in the room, the guy that was available, how high did they have him?
Yeah.
So what Ryan said, and just so fans know, what Ryan said is the Blues basically have to rank their top 19. Okay. Now they knew that they are not going to have the number 1 pick. So they didn't go scout Matt Schaefer. They didn't waste a whole lot of time.
But they wasted 3
Okay.
minutes while they were on the clock to make the selection, which is baffling to me.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, but the Blues aren't going to waste a whole lot of time scouting them, because they know that they're going to know of them, but they're not going to get them. So they're going to spend all that other time. And, I look at Oscar Sundqvist is here tonight, looking over there. So what kind of work do they do when they scout a player? Okay, this is a player, Oscar Sundqvist, obviously, that was with the Penguins when the Blues traded for him. Doug Armstrong did an event with me, and he said, well, let me give you an example. Oscar Sundqvist. He goes, we learned in doing our homework on Oscar Sundqvist that it may take him to get the player he is. It may not be in the first year with him. It may be in the second year, right? It may be in the second year when he gets comfortable with where he's living and everywhere he's been and at every level. Once he's gotten comfortable where he's at, his play skyrockets. How do they figure some of this out? When it came to Oscar Sundqvist, they went to a rink, right, where he grew up, and they talked to a Zamboni driver.
Wow.
And so, I mean, think about that. They talked to somebody that knew him that say, okay, and that's how they find this stuff out. And then, what happens with Sonny? Remember that first year, part of 18-19, it's just not looking good.
Yeah.
At one point you're thinking, are they putting him, are they going to send him down? Right. And he's the one that Sidney Crosby looked at Joe Vitale and said, we never should have gotten rid of him.
Yep.
You're going to love him. And then, I mean, he's been the engine for the Blues. Once again, had another outstanding player. So that's the kind of detail that they will go into when they scout players and these young guys and these scouts that drive through, late at night, going from one town to another and cold roads and all that stuff. So the fact that you said, when you look at these mock drafts and how it works, and I will never forget doing a draft party at Jay Bucks and Clayton. All right. When the Blues drafted TJ Oshie.
Is this after you were Stanley Cup handler for the afternoon?
Yeah. So this was the Blues drafted TJ Oshie. We were doing a draft show at Jay Bucks and Clayton because the team wasn't very good. Right. So we're really hyping up the draft. And Bob McKenzie went on the air on TSN after that pick of TJ Oshie and said the Blues really went off the board on that one. Right? On Oshie, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, look at the kind of player that guy became.
Yeah.
Right? So Just because you look at these rankings and you look at how everything's going, it's not always going to be the ones that make it. So, look at one of my favorite things to do is go back and look at drafts and say, hey, if you redraft it, what would you do? How would you redraft this pick? How would you redraft this one? So I'm curious to see how that'll all pan out.
Well, and I remember Tony Feltrin telling us that at the Nashville draft when they took Lindstein. I think he was the third first-round pick that they took because they took Stenberg second. And on the ESPN broadcast, we carried the pick, and the broadcasters were like, wow, this guy's not even in my top 64 of the draft. I'm not sure what they're doing here. Feltrin had told us that was one of their top 5 players that they wanted to make sure they got in this draft if they were available to them.
Right. And that is why, when they do these picks and they do these drafts and they do, the mocks, the one thing that you've seen with Doug Armstrong, these guys are really coy.
Yeah.
Take you back to the drafting of Colton Parayko, right? Colton didn't hit his big growth spurt till his sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
Right. And the Blues had started, the Blues had started scouting him. Well, they wouldn't scout him, in the big arenas where okay, you're noticing, I can know who's here, see who's on the scout list, that kind of stuff. They would go to the more remote games and scout him where other people might not have been willing to drive and go. And that's why when it came to the Blues taking Colton Parayko, he was on their list, but he was not on the list of others.
Yeah.
For that thing. Bobby Plager always talked about when he was doing all that scouting for the Blues, a lot of times he would buy a ticket to the arena and sit in a seat.
Really?
Rather than ask for a press box and tell somebody here to scout, because he didn't want anybody else to know that he was in there scouting a team and scouting stuff. And he would that's sometimes how, if he was really onto something, or you might have a conversation with a scout, say, no, I'm looking at this guy. And it turns out you're looking way over here at this guy, not watching somebody. And they'll try to throw things off. But that's why these guys in the room, obviously they know so much more and what they're doing with it, because they know what they need and they see something. And now I will tell you that over the last couple of years, one of the biggest things that the Blues have been looking for, Alex, no matter who they've scouted, high hockey IQ and character. And that's the one thing that you're seeing in these winning franchises now is you can coach the game. And talent is talent, and all these guys have a good amount of talent, figuring it out, right? Their mental capacity to battle and succeed, right? Their character, the quality. When you go into the St. Louis Blues locker room and you go to have a conversation with a young player, sometimes, Alex, they'll look at you and they're uncomfortable in the moment. They don't have some of the social skills to look you in the eye, to shake your hand, to just be able to express their thoughts to a question you ask. Man, Jake Neighbors, Zach Bolduc, Zach Dean, Jimmy Snuggerud, Alexei Toropchenko, right? All of these guys have this just character ability to them. When you had a chance to meet Stenberg, at prospect camps and stuff like that, and you have this conversation like, oh man, like I told you, when you sit down and you look at Jake Neighbors and you have a conversation with Jake Neighbors, right?
Joey and I did an interview him the day he was drafted for the podcast that we used to do. And we got off the phone with Jake, and Joey looked at me and he goes, that kid reminds me of Matthew and Brady Tkachuk. He's like, he's going to be an NHLer.
I sat in a room right across the hall from where we're broadcasting from down here tonight and interviewed Barrett Jackman before his first NHL game. Bert Godin was our equipment manager. I'm sitting on the futon in the equipment room, and that's where I interviewed Barrett Jackman before his first NHL game. Walked away from that, went, that dude's not a rookie. Interviewed David Backes in the lobby in Pittsburgh before his first NHL game. Went, nope, that's not a rookie. Jake Neighbors, we did not know in Colorado that Jake was going to be playing that night. We weren't told. It was on the bus that we find out he's actually going to be in. So the PR team pulled Jake Neighbors aside at the hotel, in the lobby of our hotel in Colorado. Me, Joe, John Kelly, Darren Pang had a conversation with Jake Neighbors, walked away and went, Barrett Jackman. And that's the quality. And you're seeing that. You can go having one of the best guys to talk to in the room to talk hockey with is Zach Bolduc.
Oh, absolutely.
And so but that also means they've got this ability to connect with the veteran guys too. And that's important. So the one thing I know, and I don't know who the Blues are going to pick at 19, right? And I can promise you that when they pick them, I'm still going to know absolutely nothing about them. Okay, until I get to finally find out who it is and ask questions.
That's why we'll be interviewing people.
I will not. I promise you, I will not try to BS my way through trying to tell you something about the guy that I know nothing about. Okay, but we'll get caught up and we'll tell you about him, right? But I can guarantee you this: when they did their interviews with him, okay, so they at the combine or somewhere right around there, they interviewed close to 73 players.
Wow.
Okay. Right, so somewhere in the low 70s.
Imagine having to sift through all of that information.
So quick interviews, around 70 players, and stuff. So the thing of it is, the one thing I know is it's going to be a high character person.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
Well,
and that is truly part of the impact of Alexander Steen.
And that goes back to what you talked about, where Doug Armstrong mentioned that it's like, look, these guys, you don't expect them to impact your team 4 to 5 years from now. He said that, the top half of the draft, those are the great players. And then once you get past that, you just have a lot of guys that are in the same categories as each other. So you have to find ways for certain players to stand out from others. Some teams go for talent. Some teams go for upside and certain abilities. But when you go IQ and you go in character, that matches the identity of what the team is trying to identify.
That's exactly right. And that's how you build a team.
Yep.
That's how you build a team. When Jim Montgomery joined me on stage earlier tonight and he knew that the Blues had some good players. He didn't realize coaching against them or scouting against them, just how good the quality of the people that the Blues had in the room. And he goes, and by the time we got things rolling, now you could see it really coming through. And that's going to be part of that. Cool moment just a moment ago and on the NHL draft when Columbus picked. And, obviously Nikki Glazer is going to be announcing the Blues pick. Some teams really got creative and just brought out a former player. But
the Anaheim Ducks brought back 2 Mighty Ducks.
Okay,
had them up there.
Okay, there's at least some creativity.
I think there's 3 that are just former players that decided to come out.
But the cool moment with the Columbus Blue Jacket having Meredith Gaudreau, announce the pick. That organization really had. They did an amazing job with an unspeakable tragedy.
Yeah.
Their fan base, their organization, and supporting that family, and so did the entire world of hockey.
Well,
really cool,
and especially the NHL doing a great job, and the Columbus Blue Jackets of having her present Sean Monahan with what was it? It was the King Clancy Award, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
of
that's
that.
right. Yep.
That one was a really cool video to see. I mean, she has been involved with Columbus from Johnny's passing, from the end of the season into the offseason. It's kind of like she's become the face of that Columbus Blue Jackets team, which is kind of cool to see.
Yeah, you know what the NHL did, for those that didn't know this, they, instead of having an awards banquet and awards show, right, that doesn't get a ton of views, right? They decided to, when they announced their awards, they did it in unique social media viral kind of ways. So they set it up where they'd have, the surprise, that kind of stuff. And it really was a fun way to watch it. Just trying something different. If it doesn't work, people make fun of it. Okay, well, it's not surgery. We're not, no one's getting hurt. It's an idea you try. And the NHL is getting good at this. This is why the momentum of what the league is doing. This is why it was so important to get that CBA done. You're not the NFL. You're not going to be, but wow, this sport is connecting so much, both with men and women alike and younger people alike, that it's really quite something else. So, try it.
Yeah.
I think people get too negative too quick about
in sports.
But,
come on, Curbs. Yeah. Sports and fans getting too negative too fast. Get out of here with that.
What I wanted to do? I wanted to have a bunch of note cards here for Nikki Glazer to see if she could pronounce some of these hockey names. I thought we should have done like a training session to get her ready to make that pick.
Or it would have been like the Saturday Night Live skit, which was what, Chance the Rapper, that was the one that did it, where he was like, right. And this guy, and he's like, Mika Zip. He's like, well, that's not a real name. And then, that's the way you go with this one. I always think anytime you do a hockey name spelling bee with somebody that doesn't know a lot about hockey, that's always entertaining in that front. So.
All right.
Well, let's do this. The Vancouver Canucks just made their pick 15, which means we're getting closer to the Blues pick at number 19. So let's take a break. We'll come back on the other side and kind of assess where things are at. hopefully joined by a couple of guests along the way as well. But we're getting closer to the draft pick for the Blues. It is the NHL Draft Show here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN.
is the 2025
We'll talk a little
NHL
Dobson
Draft
here, Grant.
on 101 ESPN.
Welcome back into our NHL Draft Show. Alex Ferrario back with you. Chris Kerber just walked up on stage to make an announcement. He'll be back with us in just a bit. And then I'll have to duck out, obviously, because he will be up on stage with Nikki Glazer once she is making the Blues selection at number 19. If you missed it earlier, Nikki Glazer hopped on with us. You can go back after the show tonight over on our YouTube channel. So we won't have this on an audio podcast, but this will be on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL, and appreciate Doty for helping us get this out there. But you can go back after the show tonight and go back and listen through. We've had a lot of really fun hockey conversation. Chris Kerber's been with us tonight talking just about where things are at with the Blues, the draft, some history with it, and then, of course, the interview that we had with Nikki Glazer. So we can get into all of those conversations. If you want to go back and check that out up on our YouTube channel after the show tonight. So the New York Islanders are making their pick at number 16, which means we're about 3 picks away from the Blues picking this one tonight, Curbs. And
I don't know why I really don't know why in the NHL we don't see more of these picks traded.
Yeah, we've seen 1 pick traded so far. Now, we saw a couple of get traded, obviously, earlier today with the Islanders and Montreal thing. Right. We saw the pick from the Rangers get moved to next year to where Pittsburgh moved up into this draft. But you don't see trades happen in the draft.
No, not at the draft. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I follow the other sports enough to know like whether this is as normal as uncommon. And I don't have the attention span to watch all 47 rounds of the Major League Baseball draft.
They're very smart on that one.
But I think what you glean from this year in, year out, Alex, continues to be the value of those picks. Okay, so when we go back to the offer sheets that, signed by Broberg and Holloway, the Blues had to have, their second and third round picks to make it happen. That is why the Blues do not have a second and a third round pick. Now, they also don't have a fourth and a fifth, right? So I think the entire hockey operations department is going to be able to go play 27 holes of golf tomorrow morning before they have to come in.
I love that joke by Doug.
Pick, okay?
That's great.
So, but it shows you the importance of teams holding on to these things, even the later first round picks. So to me, that just shows you how important that capital is to make changes to your team come the trade deadline or during a season.
Yeah.
And that's a real big part of it. But I think I'm going to kind of remain somewhat intrigued for a while on when we really start to see teams just take a more aggressive approach to building, to building their teams. And, because you can honestly go back, like for example, take a look at go back and look at the draft history, the recent draft history of the Washington Capitals.
Yeah.
Obviously when you're in a winning window like they were in, like the Pittsburgh Penguins are in, you're trading a lot of first round draft picks, to keep players at a certain level and to keep things going. Right. Okay. So the reality of it is you have to find success in picking a little later on in the draft and, the second and third rounds to be able to do it. But the other part of that is go look at some of these teams and realize it's been 5 years since one of their own draft picks has even played a game for them.
Yeah.
And
that's a fair amount of time considering Doug.
8 years since you might, in a couple of cases where you're 8 years without one of their own draft picks impacting them.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And that's one where the Blues, it started under Larry Plow with Jarmo Kekalainen, and the job that Jarmo did was so doggone good that the job that he did was so good. And then it went to Bill Armstrong, and then it went to Tony Felcher. And Doug talked about this with us on Monday. If you remember, Alex, when he was talking about the work that they put in and their ability to handle the draft and the experience that they have, and even when Bill took over, Bill Armstrong didn't have as much experience, but learned it, that kind of thing. And boy, that makes a difference because it's keeping the Blues in a competitive scenario. I mean, there's a real reason why this team had only missed the playoffs 3 consecutive years twice.
Yeah. Well, somebody brought this up during our show earlier today. Yes, trades don't typically happen at the draft, but man, you think of 2 pretty massive trades in Blues franchise history. Doug Armstrong trading for Braden Shen night one of the draft
Yes.
with Philadelphia, and then with the Pittsburgh Penguins to get Oscar Sundqvist when he traded away Ryan Reeves, and they got the pick that turned into Klim Kostin.
Right. So that kind of echoes the point I've been trying to make, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you turned a draft pick. You go back and you look at that Braden Shen deal and with the 2 picks that Philadelphia had, they took Farabee and Frost.
Neither are playing with the team.
Right? Not anymore. And, one's in Calgary. I think I can't remember where the other one is.
Yeah, I was going to say, where did Farabee go?
But was Farabee still with
Philly? Farabee's with Calgary. Morgan Frost went to Calgary too. I think they both went in that trade.
Oh, did they trade them both?
Yeah, they traded them both to Calgary in that
Okay.
trade. So the 2 first-round picks that they got for the Braden Shen deal were both traded to Calgary this year.
Okay, right. And you're going to tell me, and somebody's going, well, you got to wait and see how that. No, the Blues clearly won that trade.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's not even close. So there's an example where the gamble of 2 first-round picks really didn't even pay off. That's why if you're the St. Louis Blues, you really don't know if Stenberg is going to be a player.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if Lindstein is going to be a player. You still don't know about Dvorsky yet. Okay, but you got to be really excited by what you're seeing with him.
Yeah.
Now you got to get him in here and let's see what happens. When the dog's got to fight in the corner for that bone, right? and so to me, like, if you have a chance and you have a 9th overall pick like Buffalo had, and you could package that for a player like a Braden Shen somewhere, sayonara, baby, trade the pick and get the player and then sign him. And the next thing you know, you might have your next 10-year player and your future captain, and so, but that's the experience of a Doug Armstrong.
Yeah.
Jarmo Kekalainen, terrific guy. He's now, and I think this is actually good for Buffalo. He's an advisor to Kevin Adams, right? So Jarmo Kekalainen is helping now the Buffalo Sabres, right? Maybe the biggest mistake, and probably one of the things that Jarmo, he'd still be in Columbus as general manager, is if he knew when to trade some of those. Eventually, you draft enough, you get enough high picks, you get enough players in your system, you have no room for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, try to tell me where, if you look at it, you try to tell me where Stenberg, Lindstein, Kaskamaki, right? Peterson,
Dean,
tell me where they fit in this team. Which, by the way, is a team that, in my opinion, is very close to entering another championship window, right? And when you do that, now it's even harder for young players to get playing time, which is what happened to Broberg and Holloway, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's a huge thing there, and so why wouldn't you trade a pick like that and go get a team to trade you that player? If you're Doug Armstrong and you're going to look at the media and say, we think that what we ended up doing and what Broberg and Holloway did for us ended up advancing this retool process anywhere from 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right then and there. If you're San Jose, if you're Anaheim, if you're the New York Islanders, right? I mean, I know the Montreal Canadiens went to the Stanley Cup final, in the bubble. Okay. But that was such a unique, weird situation. They've been rebuilding for a long time too.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating to me. I just think there's got to be way more aggressive. Go find the teams that value those picks, and grab somebody from them.
Yeah. Speaking of Dvorsky, and I know we'll go quick here because I know you're going to have to duck out because we're getting close. The Islanders just made another pick. Yes, they had back-to-back picks because of that Noah Dobson trade earlier. So they just took a forward and they just took a defenseman. So
is there a better, maybe not, well, I don't know if there's a better back-to-back pick than what the Vancouver Canucks did.
No.
When they went Sedin.
How did that happen? I still am baffled by how they got the second and third pick because everywhere you look, it doesn't look like they traded for anything.
No, they did. They made it.
They traded with.
I got to go back and look it up, Alex, because I don't want to misrepresent it. But they had the one pick, and then they made a trade at some point in time to where they got them both to have both kids drafted in there. But I'll go, man. Listen, that 2010 draft, Doug Armstrong's first draft as general manager of the St. Louis Blues. Because of where the Blues ended up finishing, they missed remember, they made the playoffs in 2009, then they missed in 2010, right? So in 2010, they've got the 14th overall pick, and they take Jaden Schwartz. They had picked the year before David Rundblad. Now, this is the way the general manager thinks. He goes, okay, we've got Eric Johnson. We've got Alex Pietrangelo. Okay, right? We don't need another same shot defenseman in David Rundblad. He goes, there's just not going to be room on this team with those other 2 picks for this guy, right? Turns out he didn't have any kind of a career, right? But they were able to trade that player to Ottawa, picked up the number 16th overall pick, and that's where they took Vladimir Tarasenko. So they went Schwartz 14, Tarasenko 16, right? Tarasenko at the time, everybody was convinced is easily a top 5 overall pick, but they didn't know whether or not he was going to come over to the United States. Jarmo Kekalainen would go over, scout him in Siberia. Jarmo Kekalainen went over there one time. Another scout told me, he goes, we started looking at Tarasenko. He goes, I got all dressed up in a suit. I go to the rink, figure I'm going to be all alone here in Siberia. I walk over, and who's already standing in the corner talking to Vladimir but Jarmo Kekalainen? And that's the kind of work that these guys put behind the scenes on this.
That's why it's always fascinating. Curbs, I know you got to duck out as we are getting closer to the Blues selection. 17 was just picked, so we're headed to number 18 and then 19. So the Blues selecting potentially 19th overall pick. Again, obviously things can still change. I will say there's a couple of players that are still on the board. Surprising to me once the Blues get to that spot, whether it's this Cole Reshny kid that's the centerman or Logan Hensler, right-handed defenseman, that still is there for St. Louis. So we'll see kind of what happens at number 19 as the Islanders just did their back-to-back picks. 2 picks away from the Blues. Let's take a break. We'll come back, continue our conversation, and then we'll bring you that pick live by St. Louis right here on the NHL Draft Show here on 101.
on your home for Blues hockey, 101 ESPN.
Well, Chris Kerber has just made his way to the stage alongside comedian Nikki Glazer as they will be making the next selection at the NHL draft, as we are back here at the NHL draft show, along with Chris Kerber, who's up on stage, Graham Francis, Jordan Deacon, Doty. I'm Alex Ferrario, as the Blues are getting set to make the 19th overall selection, as the Calgary Flames just made the pick, and they picked the guy that I was hoping was still there for the Blues. Kolresny was just selected by the Calgary Flames. So it sets up an intriguing selection at number 19. And as Curbs mentioned, by no means am I a draft expert on what they're taking, who they're taking, the prospect that he becomes. But my gut would tell me, which, look, I am taking a shot in the dark in this one. My gut tells me you're going to see a right-handed defenseman get selected here at this pick. This was the sentiment that was just taken by the Calgary Flames, Kolresny. It was an intriguing one, in my opinion, because they said he played tenacious on the puck. He was a smaller guy, but he had speed. He was fast. He could make plays. And, of course, you always want as many centermen as possible. Man, if you go through, we talked earlier about how the players that were expected to go higher in the draft were dropping lower and lower. All of those guys have been taken at this point. So we have seen multiple players get selected that were dropping, but just didn't drop far enough. So a couple of names to keep an eye on just in case, as again, Nikki Glazer and Chris Kerber just headed for the stage. So they'll be making an announcement sooner rather than later. And we'll have that announcement for you, by the way, via the ESPN broadcast of the NHL draft. So we'll take you to the actual stage when that pick is being made. But, a couple of players you're just keeping an eye on once we get to this point. Cameron Reed, who is a left-handed defenseman, is one that I've seen on the Athletics' most recent mock draft. Logan Hensler is the right-handed defenseman that has been bandied about for the Blues, 6'3", 192 pounds for the U.S. National Development Team. I have brought up Blake Fiddler, who is another interesting name that could potentially get selected, a right-handed defenseman. He's 6'4", 200-something pounds. And then the wild card in all of this one, and I'm very curious as to how this one goes down. Do the Blues select a goaltender with the 19th overall pick? The Blues, at least under Doug Armstrong, have never selected a goaltender in the first round. I believe the highest a goaltender has ever been selected by the Blues was Evan Fitzpatrick in the second round. That's it. Joel Hofer, third round. Jordan Binnington, third or fourth round, if I'm not mistaken on that one. But he's a wild card in this one because a lot has said that this Joshua Ravensbergen is a potential star goaltender. Now, we all know how that goes for goaltenders when they're drafted versus when they make it to the NHL, but just something to keep an eye on through all of this. And this leads you back into that conversation that we had moments ago with Curbs, just in terms of teams that keep all those picks. Whether you draft a winger, whether you draft a left-handed defenseman, two areas of strength for the St. Louis Blues, one thing to always know is those guys all aren't going to make the NHL roster, whether they don't turn out to be what you thought they were going to be or whether they get moved in trades. Those pieces become assets for an NHL team. And like Curbs mentioned, the Blues have stockpiled so many wingers. You think of the guys that they have on their team now in terms of Buchnevich and Holloway and Kyrou and Bolduc and Neighbors and Holloway. Like, you've got your top nine essentially locked in of what your forwards look like. But then you've also got the Stenbergs, you've got the Kaskamakis, you've got the Pekarchiks and the Stancils. These are all in your system. At some point, these pieces become weapons for you to acquire a bigger piece for your team. The one that I always kind of reference of what the Blues have accomplished was when they traded for Justin Falk. Dominic Bach was a first-round draft pick that the Blues had selected, and I believe it was a year after he was selected first overall, the Blues took that piece, traded it to the Carolina Hurricanes along with a couple of other NHL pieces to acquire Justin Falk. Justin Falk has been a part of this NHL roster since 2018, 2019. That's an NHL trade to make your team better for the now. Now, I know a lot of people have different opinions on Justin Falk, but it remains to be seen if that COVID season never happened. The Blues were a Stanley Cup favorite to go back-to-back in 2019, 2020. And then, of course, you had that shortened season where things kind of spiraled out of control that led the Blues into their retool. So draft picks that get selected may or may not be a part of this team, but one thing's for certain, they can be a big piece for the Blues via trade. And speaking of trade, as we're awaiting the pick 19th overall, I'm sure a lot of people might be surprised that the Blues are selecting 19th overall. Maybe not. Maybe a lot of people believe that this pick was always going to be here. The fact that there was not a whole lot of moves tells me a couple of things. One, teams weren't willing to trade NHL players for draft picks in this year's draft. Sometimes teams evaluate drafts differently than other teams do. But it also tells me that, to Kerb's point earlier in the show, you may see a lot more hockey trades go down after the NHL draft. Now, a lot of the times, these draft nights spark the conversation that leads to a potential trade a month from now, 3 weeks from now. Ryan O'Reilly, the trade conversation started at the draft. It led to, of course, day 2 of free agency, and then, of course, the Blues pulled off the trade for Ryan O'Reilly. Sometimes those things are sparked at the draft conversation, and the fact that you're not seeing a whole lot of draft picks traded tells me that I do wonder if a lot more noise takes place in the following days leading up to free agency on July 1st. And that's where it feels like the Blues are waiting to strike. Is it free agency? Is it via trade? You're looking for pieces for that NHL roster. And I'm not sure if it's going to be from this draft pick tonight. Maybe it's a piece of a trade down the road. But for the Blues, the goal is still finding ways to upgrade. And you wonder if the Blues have the ability to make that upgrade for their roster. So Gary Bettman is walking towards the podium. The pick is officially in for the St. Louis Blues. So once they go to Nikki Glazer at the stage, we will carry that live over on ESPN's national broadcast right here on the YouTube channel at 101 ESPN. Here it is.
St. Louis has the next pick. Get ready to laugh. Not at the Blues' next pick, but at this hilarious stand-up comedian. Live from the Blues Watch Party in St. Louis, Nikki Glazer.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to all of our season ticket holders here at the Enterprise Center in St. Louis, Missouri. And to all the Blues fans watching at home on your couches, eating Emo's pizza, let's go Blues. Yes, I'm Nikki Glazer. I am a proud St. Louisan. I literally live right down the street, so I am so happy to be here. I mean, I'm happier than Brett Hull at an open bar, you know? We went Blues. So I really am honored to be here to announce the 19th draft pick for the St. Louis Blues. Fun fact about me, in high school, I was actually my prom date's 19th pick, and I was traded after the first dance. But enough about me. Let's get to this. With the 19th overall selection in the 2025 NHL entry draft, the St. Louis Blues are proud to select from the Blainville-Boisbrand Armada right winger Justin Carbonneau.
Great job. I love her.
There you go, Nikki Glazer. Man, you knew the jokes were going to hit. She got an Emo's Pizza in there. Also really enjoyed that 19th pick at a prom. I was probably a 20 pick at some point, but totally understand where she's coming from. Surprise pick there. I talked a lot about a centerman, a defenseman, and instead the Blues goes with a winger, Justin Carbonneau, which, by the way, mock drafts had this player somewhere between 10 and 13. The Athletics' most recent mock draft was 13th overall. He was tied for second in the QMJHL season scoring last year with 46 goals in 62 games. He's 6'1", 191 pounds, and this is the description over on The Athletic. Carbonneau has been a name I've heard with the Detroit in the draft lead-up. Carbonneau, legit NHL speed and power in his game to go with a high level of skill. He and Carter Bear, who was selected by the Detroit Red Wings at 13th overall, fit heavily into what Detroit was tending to do, which, by the way, as you can tell from this Detroit was the team that was expected to take Carbonneau. Big guy, fast player, nasty with the puck. It says he's got power to his game, but it also has a high level of skill. But you're adding a winger to a system that is already chock full of wingers, which I do find always so fascinating for the Blues. But you heard Kerbs talk about it a little bit ago, talking about how two things are certain when it comes to picks. If the Blues are selecting them, it's character and it's hockey IQ. So I will be fascinated to hear what Doug Armstrong has to say about this selection, where they had him ranked. Hopefully we'll hear from Doug Armstrong, hear from Tony Feltrin as well, if he can able to stop by. I know there's a lot going on with this draft, and of course there's 13 more picks that have to take place. So if you're just joining us, Justin Carbonneau was selected by the Blues at 19th overall. A lot of mock drafts had him selected at 13th overall. 6'1", 191-pound winger with the description on The Athletic, legit NHL speed, power in his game to go with a high level of skill. So let's do this. Let's take a break, kind of see where we're at, and then we'll reset the table here on the NHL Draft Show after the Blues selected 19th overall here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN.
Here's Chris Kerber and Alex Ferrario on your home for Blues Hockey, 101 ESPN.
That's what we do here on the NHL Draft Show. We do some quick reaction to what takes place at the NHL Draft. Still, we have only seen one trade. We're 19 picks through this NHL Draft after what was rumored to be one of the craziest drafts. Has not been that at all. But if you're just joining us here on the NHL Draft Show, the Blues just made their selection. Justin Carbonneau from the QMJHL. Props to Nikki Glazer for trying to pronounce the team that he was a part of. Blainville Bjornsbrand Armada. That is a lot of vowels and very little consonants, but he scored 46 goals last season in 62 games played for them. To put that into context for you, that was his second full season in the QMJHL. Zach Bolduc was a player in the QMJHL. His second full season put up 55 goals and 99 points in the QMJHL. So just a little context in terms of a player that had played in a league over in juniors and what they produce. But he's also 18 years old, and Matt Bolduc did that when he was 19 and 20. So we're talking about somebody who might have at least 2 more years playing in junior hockey of where he wants to go. But, reading up on Carbonneau from Scott Wheeler over on The Athletic, which do yourself a favor and subscribe to that. You can kind of find out more information of him. I'm not going to soil everything for you, but he's labeled as always having high-end skills. That's way they've talked about him throughout his time over in the QMJHL. But this is the part that I always find so interesting of how coaches label them. And look, they're coaches. They're going to prop up their players as much as possible. Called him a tank. Said that he plays about as big as you would imagine. He plays like he's going to run through a lot of guys that he wouldn't even practice with. He's built different, age, physical maturity, and has the body of a power forward. But a body of a power forward with the shot of a goal scorer at the NHL. That's how they've labeled him. So again, you stockpile as many wingers as you want in the National Hockey League, because who knows what those pieces become. I referenced Dominic Bach when he was selected first overall, got the Blues an NHL caliber defenseman. This player could be a piece for the Blues in 3 to 4 years. This player could be a piece in a trade, but it goes to show you the label or the character that the Blues were seeking in terms of high IQ, which is what Scott Wheeler mentions in his Athletic piece, power forward, strong body presence on the ice, and then you've got that shooting ability for the Blues. So that is it for the draft picks for the Blues. They don't make another pick until the 5th round tomorrow. It's the 5th and 6th round pick, if I'm not mistaken, for the Blues, barring some type of trade. But the Blues with 3 picks in this year's draft, and they select it on a winger. And again, if you look at what some of the other names that were available on the mock drafts, there were positions that you look at, but nobody was ranked higher than what Carbonneau was. Again, this is somebody that looked as if he was a 12 to 15 pick at the NHL draft. And I'm not saying they got a steal in this one. This is just how mock drafts have put them out there. But there were a lot of defensemen still available for the Blues. Cameron Reed, Logan Hensler, Blake Fiddler. These were pieces that kind of wondered, would the Blues be looking more at defensemen than they were forwards, but they went with the best available player, which is never a bad thing for this Blues team. So Justin Carbonneau selected as the 19th overall pick for the St. Louis Blues. And again, do yourself a favor and go check out the piece by Scott Wheeler over on The Athletic, talking about the type of player that Justin Carbonneau is. So the Blues now, with that pick in the books, will just watch the rest of this draft go down and let the rumors continue to swirl. Just kind of a recap of this one tonight for everybody that's joining us. We only saw one trade that was made, and it was Philadelphia trading up with the Pittsburgh Penguins to get back up higher into the draft. 12th overall, they traded the 22nd and 31st overall pick, so they move up higher in the draft. Other than that, everybody has stayed where they are at. The Islanders, of course, had 3 picks. Of course, those 2 picks that they acquired from the Noah Dobson trade that took place earlier today. So now we enter the final 12 picks of the NHL draft with the Columbus Blue Jackets on the clock right now. So for the Blues, bring in another winger that adds in to the stockpile of wingers of an Otto Stenberg, a Juraj Pekarczyk, a Jakub Stancil, on top of all of the guys that they have at the NHL level. But an expectation of a guy that'll probably be going back to juniors, but will, by the way, be at rookie camp starting next week. They have their prospect camp for the entire week next week that starts on Monday and goes to Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. And it's free to the public out at Centene Community Ice Center. So if you want to, make sure you get out there to see some of these guys in action. I know Lindstein will be there. Pekarczyk will be there. Jakub Stancil will be here. The draft picks that are selected this evening will be there. And a couple of kids from the KHL in terms of Korotki and Tomas Mirsik will all be out at that prospect camp. So a lot of guys for you to go check out at that tournament, which BK and Ferrario will actually be broadcasting from there on Tuesday and a Wednesday, which is day 1 and day 2 of free agency. So plenty more hockey coming your way as the offseason is officially underway. hockey season never ends, or at least it doesn't end until August. Let's take a break. We'll come back. Let's kind of reset things, see where we're at, see if we could get some guests along the way. If anything, we'll have our final thoughts with Chris Kerber as we're winding down the NHL Draft Show here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN.
From Enterprise Center for the 2025 NHL Draft, here's Chris Kerber and Alex Ferrario on your home for Blues Hockey, 101 ESPN.
Chris Kerber will be back with us in just a bit to put a bow on this NHL Draft show. If you're just joining us, the Blues selected Justin Carbonneau at 19 overall in this year's first round. I really kind of wonder if the Blues wanted that Cole Reshney that was selected by Calgary. You kind of see Doug Armstrong pacing a little bit, kind of wonder what's going on. You always wonder if there was a guy that they wanted sooner, that sometimes you just can't pull those trades off. But I got a couple of comps for you on this one, which everyone loves a good comp in NHL prospects. Daily Faceoff put it out there that comp for him plays a lot like Brock Besser, a big shot with a heavy body. Another one put it out there that Owen Tippett from the Philadelphia Flyers, another piece that has comped to the player that the Blues selected, Justin Carbonneau, at 19 overall. Curb, sounds like a pretty raucous crowd out there with Nikki making the announcement.
Yeah, that was really cool. It was a fun to see her do it. She cracked a couple great jokes.
Oh my God, the prom pick was fantastic
in the middle. And listen, so far, best pick presenter of the night.
Oh, 100%.
Best pick presenter of the night.
100%.
As great as it was to have, such an amazing hockey player and, the guy that's been so, running the Hockey Hall of Fame and Lanny McDonald up there. Welcome everybody to the draft party or whatever. Now we had the best right here.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay,
and
so that was
had the best looking jersey up there as well.
Yeah,
props to Brenda Wilbur and Steve Chapman and company for putting that out there.
Yeah, that part is that's really cool. So, the Blues stick with it. There wasn't a move to be made yet in terms of either a trade of a roster guy. Now, the one thing that'll be really interesting is if you go back to the Ryan O'Reilly trade, and Doug Armstrong kind of said that he didn't anticipate saying, like, he kind of preluded that to us on Monday.
Yeah.
But the thing of it is with this being decentralized, what hasn't happened is, so right now the Blues don't really have anything going on. What Doug's not doing is walking around from one table to another. He's not getting up to go to the bathroom and then ends up stopping and talking, having a conversation with the guy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the beginnings of the Ryan O'Reilly trade happened. Those trade talks started at the draft, and then it was after free agency when the St. Louis, a couple of key things happened. Perron was available, re-signed with the Blues. Bozak re-signs with the St. Louis Blues. They solidified their forward position, and then Patrick Berglund's agent made the mistake of all mistakes by not submitting the no trade list, which then allowed the Blues to trade Patrick Berglund to any team in the league.
Right.
And because of that, they were able to include him in that deal for Ryan O'Reilly. And so, something that was consummated at the draft, happens just after free agency. As a matter of fact, there was a moment about 4:00 in the afternoon on July 1st, 4 or 5 o'clock. They're like, yeah, you know what? We're not going to do anything today because the content team was hanging around the room. And just in case there's a move, just in case something's going on, there was a vibe that, the Blues were in on something. And so everybody started going home. Then all of a sudden we got a couple text messages. Hey, we got to get back here. We get back there. And then that trade ends up happening. And, and that's how, Trevor Nickerson and his production crew actually got the video of Doug Armstrong making that first call to Ryan O'Reilly. And Ryan had just gotten married. He was out on a boat, and
surprised he had signal.
They finally got a hold of him and he said, well, let's go win a cup. And obviously he did. So I'm fascinated how much kind of out of the water now. Like, so there's a lot of discussions. Had this draft been centralized, that could have happened, and it could, even with the Blues, without having a couple of picks tomorrow, that are not going to happen naturally.
Yeah.
And it's like here's the example, Alex. If when you cover a morning skate, you and Jordan get to a morning skate, or Grant, and you go into a room and maybe you have to say, okay, we know we got to get Jake Neighbors for this, so we know we got to get Braden Shen for this topic that we're going to make part of the pregame show. But then, Sammy or Zach Bolduc walks past you, right? You say hey to him, maybe a conversation starts, and you end up getting something that you didn't think you were going to get.
Yep.
Those are the casual conversations that actually lead to a lot of things that don't happen. It'll be real interesting. I've talked to a couple people in management of a couple of teams that feel that this could be a one and done. There's a lot of wonkiness with. I mean, I'm giving full props to Steve Mayer and his team for what they're trying to pull off here, and I think some of the video and stuff has just been fantastic.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it all plays out. But
I have to imagine
Gary Bettman was asked why you're doing it this way, and he said, because that's what the teams wanted.
I think it was 26-6 that wanted to decentralize the draft.
Bill Daly said. The vote was 26-6 to do it this way.
Yeah.
Now,
how much of that changes from maybe lack of trades that a GM probably feels like we could have pulled off if we were in person?
Yeah, no. Well, that's the thing. I mean, if I actually think that'll be the driving force
to go back to a centralized one.
If they feel like there are more quality conversations that didn't happen, I don't think it changes how you pick. I don't think it changed anything of that. I don't think it changes the presentation, to be honest with you, right? And I don't think it matters that you have 15 scouts on the stage that most people don't know who they are and that. So to me, it's one of those things where what will change is if the general managers felt that, it really hampered our ability to have some important conversations that they can't have. So Justin Carbonneau, not related to Guy Carbonneau.
I was going to say, two Carbonneaux putting on a Blues jersey.
Yeah, not related to him. And they liked his size. They liked his goal scoring ability. I think something like 90-something points, 94 points, 96 points, this past season. Decent size at 6'1", and the one thing that you do know, and this is why if you don't have a hockey deal to make, that you still go at that best player that you have available and why they're on your board, because again, you're going to get to a point in the cap era where you're going to have like a good player is going to move on. Mm-hmm. And like in the end, one of the reasons behind the TJ Oshie trade. And when I say this, I am not defending the trade. It's a trade I never loved.
It's the trade that Kerb still thinks is the worst one.
Okay. No. There's one. No.
It was the Bishop one.
That's the one.
I think that's the one you and I debated on one of our pregame shows.
But eventually, because they weren't going to be able to pay TJ and Tarasenko and Schwartz with this group and this age group becoming kind of becoming free agents at the same time. If they're not staggered, if they're not staggered in there, then you're going to have a hard time when these contracts come due.
Yeah,
and that has to all be part of how your asset management of players kind of goes along as well. No. The question with that one, I asked this of Doug.
Oh, did you really?
I said if there's one trade you could have back, what would it be? And I'm thinking, we're thinking Blues, right? For him, it was trading Brendan Morrow. Okay. And he tells a great story about that. I said, okay, let's go with this one. And it was me, Darren Pang, and Doug, and we're sitting there talking about this. And I said, okay, what about these two? Which would, if I'm going to give you the chance to pull one of these trades back, right? The Ben Bishop trade for a second-round pick, or the TJ Oshie trade for Troy Brouwer? Doug, rightfully, smartly, diplomatically, didn't answer. Okay. All right.
Kerb's in the back of his mind. Come on.
All right. And I said, without a shred of doubt to me, Ben Bishop, the Ben Bishop trade. And if I had to pick one of those two, just because goaltending is so hard to find.
Yeah.
Right. And look at what Ben did when he went to Dallas, when he went to Tampa. Right. I don't know what Ottawa was thinking, moving him either. And this is a guy that you brought up. And the problem is you traded Ben Bishop because Jarl Halak, right, whose work ethic was brutal. You traded because Jarl Halak had a really bad camp, and you were nervous about potentially going in with less of experience, and that's why you kept Brian Elliott. And so I made the case for this, and Doug Armstrong looked at me and goes and says, "Okay, but wait a minute, didn't Jarl Halak and Brian Elliott win a Jennings?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." He goes, "Well, wasn't the goaltending really good?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." I go, "I don't care, because I had a bona fide number one." Because the whole thing is through the Halak Elliott era, and with Ty Conklin kind of, through the stretch, you didn't have a bona fide number one. And you kind of had a bona fide number one. You did with Jake Allen for a couple of years. But even with that, a bona fide number one is Jordan Binnington.
Yeah.
Okay. And that to me is the big key. Now you make the case, okay, wait a minute. Well, one said, well, okay, well, what if I rescind the Oshie trade? Okay, well, you traded Oshie for Troy Brouwer. Now, that's a trade that when you look at it, the Washington Capitals won that trade every which way and twice on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Except in the 1 year that Troy Brouwer played for you, he scores what might have been the biggest goal in a number of years for the Blues, and that is the Game 7 goal with, 8 or 6.5 minutes left to go in a tie game in Game 7 on home ice against Chicago. The puck, he whiffs, the puck hits the post, comes back, he whiffs on it, recovers it, right?
Took like 3 shots at it.
And he was able to get it in, right, past Crawford.
Yep.
And at the time, and if you remember, standing in the media scrum in the room, they brought Troy Brouwer in. He was the only player on the Blues team at the time that had played in a Game 7 in the playoffs. He was the only, and then so because of that experience, then you get through the second round and you go to the conference finals against a really, really good San Jose team. If you talk to Parayko, Steen, and the core guys that were part of that run in 2016, and you ask them how important was that run 3 years later and what you learned from that, they said it was everything. You maybe don't have that run if you don't have Troy Brouwer. That's kind of the way things work out.
Yeah.
And that's really why Doug did not want to answer that question, because you can, I mean, it's ifs and buts and beers and nuts, right? So the
also like how he had that the Jennings Trophy one right in his back pocket ready to go.
Well, but I knew that one, but I'm like, yeah, okay, they won the Jennings, right? But it's not like we did anything great with it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
it's not
fair.
like we went on a run.
Fair.
It's the same thing. I mean, it's an interesting one. There's a lot of positivity around Jake Ottinger, and he hasn't moved through yet. Now, he's still a really young player. I try to tell everybody, I'm like, really? Okay, go look at Eddie Belfour.
Yeah.
Eddie Belfour didn't win it with Chicago.
Yeah.
He won it with Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, it's just fascinating how that all works. But I look at this pick for the St. Louis Blues. Unless there's a trade that gets them a pick, it's going to be a very quiet day tomorrow for them. But you would give up, like if you were to make a draft day trade today and say, I will trade Edmonton, so that it's tonight, and they go, you know what, we're going to trade Edmonton, our second round pick tomorrow for Philip Broberg, right? You're like, yeah, we'll make that trade. And you know what? I'm going to trade our third round pick to Edmonton too for Dylan Holloway. I'd be like, yeah, okay, make that trade.
Worth it.
So this is a moment where you're happy that you don't have a second and a third.
Yeah, this is the moment where you're happy that you don't do anything until round 5 tomorrow for the Blues.
Yes.
So good thing for them.
Now, so that they could still move back in there. You've got prospect camp coming up starting on the 30th.
Yeah, 30th. We're
30th?
broadcasting there
Okay.
July 1st and July 2nd.
Great. And then so you got prospect camp there, free agency on July 1st. In talking with Doug, obviously, if there's a move to be made to improve the team, he's going to do it. That's the standard line of a general manager. But this is one of those, and if you listen to Alexander Steen when he was on with the Fast Lane this past week as well, you get the sense that this is the time there where the added growth of Jake Neighbors, the added growth of Jimmy Snuggerud, the continued growth of Holloway, the continued growth of Broberg, I am still extremely excited, and even more so after this playoff run of Zach Bolduc.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's a third line player on a good NHL team or if he's a top 6 player on a really good NHL team. He's got the potential to be a top 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've seen it. And that shot, they get a training camp and all that stuff, Alex, to get him to turn that shot loose in the slot. I mean, there could be a 25, 30 goal scorer in that.
And to play with that nastiness in the boards that he does.
And then if you play better defensively and you trim your goals against by half a goal a game. And you can do that with a good penalty kill, by the way.
Yeah.
That could simply be it. And Jim Montgomery mentioned penalty kill something to work. You can trim it. You can trim it by half a goal a game. That means you'll have trimmed your goals against by 40 goals. You score the same amount you scored, but trim your goals against by 40 goals. You got one of the top goal differentials in the National Hockey League. Right. So I'm curious to see how things get tweaked to have that happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom Green making a selection.
Okay,
for the
that's
Auto-Center.
that's
gonna
awesome.
be good.
This one's gonna.
He's got his dog with him
All
too.
right.
I love Tom Green.
Tom Green looks like he hasn't stopped podcasting from the first one he did. Right.
I love everything about Tom Green. There was a TV,
he's outstanding.
There was a TV show where it was all Canadian comedians that they locked into a room, and like everyone would get eliminated. The person that would laugh would get eliminated, and the last one standing had like a certain amount of money donated to his charity of choice. It was probably the funniest 3 hours of television I've watched in a long time.
Well, okay. And again, look at the National Hockey League, what's going on here. The teams like the Blues have brought in Nikki Glazer or, Tom Green or, Meredith Gaudreau with Columbus.
Yeah.
And there's been some other good ones. That's just so different than a scouting director. And the player, the whole career be like, this guy, Matthew, or this guy's going to come up. And, years later, you're going to talk, you remember your draft day? He goes, yeah, my name was actually called by Tom Green. And there's a story to be told.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, you don't get the chance to meet him, but at least you get your name called by him.
Right.
Chris Kerber, I'm Alex Ferrario. Let's take our final break. We'll come back and we'll close things down here on the NHL Draft Show here on 101 ESPN.
Broadcasting from Enterprise Center for the 2025 NHL Draft, here's Chris Kerber and Alex Ferrario on your home for Blues Hockey, 101 ESPN.
We can handle that. Welcome back into our final segment here on the NHL Draft Show at Enterprise Center, along with the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber. I'm Alex Ferrario, and we saved the best for last after the Blues selected 19th overall. We welcome in President of Hockey Operations, Doug Armstrong. Doug, thanks for swinging by on a somewhat busy night.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you got your guy, Justin Carbonneau. What kind of scouting report can we give to our fans on Justin?
Goal scorer. And loves to score goals. So it's obviously the way the game is trending. We've added another player that likes to fill up the net, and that was Snuggerud and Kyrou and Bolduc and Holloway and Booch on the wings. Now we got a nice group of scorers coming, and we'll just continue to fill out our depth charts, and we're excited.
Can you share with us, like we saw a year ago or 2 years ago, actually, that just the great behind the scene footage and when you guys were talking about Dvorsky and what that process was like? What were some of the discussions like when it came to pick time and he was on the board, and how did that work for you? Or eventually you go, here's our guy.
Well, about pick 15 or 16, there was talk about moving back. We weren't going to move up. We felt we would get a good player there. But we also felt that if Carbonneau was gone, there was a couple other players that we liked. We thought we had some calls moving back into the early 20s. We would consider doing that. And what you do is you let the teams know behind you that player dependent, what would it take if you want to move up to 19, okay, I'll give you this pick and that. And then as soon as we saw Calgary's pick, we sent out a text saying we're going to select, and then you go to it. So there's a little bit of potential horse trading going on up until that pick, but we were happy with our player, and we didn't want to, even to move back a couple of slots, we didn't want to take any chances. We had a different player there, and we want to make sure we got this one.
Does the difficulty of that change at all for you, Doug? I know you did this back in 2020 of drafting here at Enterprise Center, but does the difficulty of those conversations change at all when you're not on the floor with the other GMs?
No, there's, it's taken a long time. There's no question, but I've actually enjoyed it. I would be interested to see what other people think. You do miss the camaraderie of walking around the draft floor, but I thought we got a lot more work done the last few days being in St. Louis, being able to sort of disperse to our own areas, go from pro to amateur. I've enjoyed it. I know that if we go back the other way, you're not getting bombarded by, quite honestly, people looking for jobs. You walk through the lobby and
hang on, that's how you got a job.
I know, and I got one.
That's actually how you got your first job.
It was going to the draft and putting resumes out. Yeah, and but it's just one of those things where here you can just basically focus on exactly what you want to do. A little bit different with free agency right around the corner too. I know. Again, these are high class problems, but rushing out of Vegas to catch a flight to get back, and you add another 6 or 7 hours to your day to get ready for free agency, which is coming around. Going to be nice tomorrow to be able to go just drive 15, 20 minutes back into Creve Coeur and relax and get up Sunday and be focused and ready to go and not traveling all day. So there are some benefits, and we'll see what other guys think, but we're happy either way. We can make it work. These are high-class problems.
When you had your player ranking, and Ryan Miller talked to the season ticket holders, we had 800 season ticket holders here tonight. Really, and all of them full package season ticket holders. Really kind of neat. And he was talking about, okay, you rank them. And we know that you're not going to spend a lot of time scouting Matt Schaefer. You're going to know about him. You're going to know what's there, but you kind of know how that goes. But the way that this draft itself played out, and there's a good grouping of guys, but depending on what teams need, where they fall could be a little bit different than your typical draft in terms of how's it goes. Was there any kind of surprise on your part that Justin was still there for you at that moment?
Well, our mocks had him going somewhere between 14 and 18.
Okay.
So 19 was right at the edge. And I go off. There's a couple of mocks that are usually pretty accurate, so we give them a little bit more weight as we're doing that.
When you say mocks that you're doing, mocks that other people might be doing,
other people are doing,
sure,
Bob McKenzie seems to have. He does his latest. He's been doing it for a long time. He's got a lot of contacts. He's usually closest.
Yeah.
But other guys do a good job, and. The problem I have with some of them, they do one every 3 days. So then they say I was right. Well, of course you're right. You have 45 mocks out there.
Just describe the NFL draft.
I like my odds.
Yeah. So it's hard to take some of these guys that serious that do that. But yeah, so you look at that, and we thought this year, I think our probably first 10 were maybe not that exact order, but they were gone.
Right.
And then you start to see, we call them jumpers. So where we had a guy on our list, okay, we need a jumper. We need guys to, like, if you want to get a guy that you have 12, 13, 14 on your list, you're picking 19, you need some guys to jump.
Right.
And then you see a jumper and another jumper, and you start to get excited that a guy that you have rated higher than when you're picking for us at 19, higher up, that he might slide or get to where we want to.
So he became one of those guys that says that this is our guy if he's still available at this pick, because the other, like, yes, okay, if somebody you had rated in the top 10 for whatever slipped, maybe you look at it, but where Justin was, you were like, man, if he's here, we're getting the player we want at this pick because we had him higher.
Yeah, so let's say at the top 10, I think went pretty consistent around the league.
Right.
If one of those guys, for whatever reason, slipped to 14 or 15, then you say, okay, what do we need to do to move up there? We have him in that area. The counter to that is, why is he slipping?
Right.
What don't we know?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's more consistent when you're picking, and I give Tony Feltrin and our staff, they're very comfortable picking at 19, 21, 23, you know. I'm comfortable selecting there too. It means that you've had a decent season. At least you've made some postseason a postseason appearance and how far you go. But
Doug, why have you guys been so good picking in that range? Well, like why? Well, let me rephrase. Why have the players you have picked turn out to be pretty successful?
I'm not sure why. I know that the work that the guys do, and we banty around a lot of different ideas and safe picks, like, you know, more reach picks, like weighing, you know, okay, well, if he hits, this is where he's going to be. I'm a big, like, I hope the top of the mountain's high, but tell me how high the valley is.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a big valley guy. I like the valley, you know. I like to start at base camp like 20.
Yep. Okay.
And then work your way up.
And then work my way up from there, you know, and you know, sometimes when you get to an area, you might swing for the fences, but like if you swing and you miss, you're out. And so our guys do a nice job of doing the character background. Usually what we find are guys that we're taking that area have the compete and will to get into the league. Whether like it's a Bolduc who's a goal scorer or a Kairu who is a goal scorer or Robert Thomas, like they get to a certain area for a reason, but then you do your homework and say they're going to outperform that because we believe in their desire to be very good at what they're good at. And that's why I think our guys have success.
So what is on tap then for you tomorrow? Obviously with the not having
much.
the picks because of that, right? You know,
Yeah. It's you
it'd
know,
be like that day you were sitting in Calgary and the radio engineer sent you a text.
yeah, exactly. It's one of those ones where, yeah, you wish you had a second and a third round pick, but I'm also happy we got Broberg and Holloway. So I mean, you can't have it both. We're happy with the decisions we made last summer. We knew that tomorrow was going to be a long day. I'm not even looking, quite honestly, to move a player to get a pick to say we did something.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody calls with a great idea, but I don't sense that we're in the position tomorrow where there's anybody. Now we'll have to go back and watch the rest of the first round. If there's somebody starts slipping, maybe we do that. But looking at our board right now, I'm not sure we're going to go start using young undrafted players to move up right now. And I'm very comfortable we're not going to move anyone off of our team to take an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
So a number of years ago in Calgary, it's a trade deadline. Good number of years ago, they got the whole, all the management up there in Calgary because the team was on this Western road trip. Bus is about to leave for the rink, and there's a guy outside the team hotel, his back turned towards us with a trench coat, and he's smoking a dart, right? And it could have been like, hey, is that Doug in the backside? So Trevor Nickerson at the time, right now, our great VP of production, Trevor Nickerson's a radio engineer, and he and Army would just quote Seinfeld left and right to each other. So here's a radio engineer that had the cojones, said on trade deadline day, takes the picture of this guy, sends it to Doug and says, hey, Doug, just relax a little bit. Things will be okay. And because we weren't doing much at trade deadline, Army says, we're sitting in here. I got the phone right there. We're actually, I think you said you were listening to some Toby Keith song,
yeah.
Right? And then the phone buzzes and everyone's, oh my gosh, we got something. And it was Trevor shooting him a picture.
Doug didn't speak to Trevor for the next year.
No, I love that stuff.
No, it was fantastic.
Yeah,
listen, last thing before we let you go here, just out of curiosity, philosophically speaking, why don't we see more trades on draft day of picks? In other words, and I guess I'll give you an example. Maybe, and I realize most teams picking in the top 10 are picking there for a reason. Maybe they need the players. But even once you get outside the top 3 to 5, and you may not have a player that impacts you for 3 or 4 years, I'm curious why, some teams that might be picking in the top 10 for the 3rd or 4th year in a row, why sometimes those picks aren't used to actually go try to get you players that have been a little bit more advanced in their development.
I think it's if you're picking in the top 10, you're probably in some form of a rebuild. And you don't want a 27 or 28-year-old. And if you have a 23-year-old, you're not likely to give them up,
Right.
to start again with an 18-year-old,
Yeah.
so it's a little bit more difficult. You saw obviously a massive trade today for 2 first-round picks with the Islanders.
Yep.
That I think was predicated on a player of a year from unrestricted free agents that was not going to go back there. So you have to have a decision to make very quickly,
Right.
on what you want to do. But I just think that, everybody tries to move, like, let me give you something that's going to be good for you in 5 years for something that's good for me tomorrow. People say, well, I'm not really sure I want to wait 5 years. And if you're picking in the top 5, those players are probably going to help you immediately. But, like a team like Utah would have been a perfect example to be able to do that, because they didn't earn that pick. They drafted that. They won a lottery to get that
Right.
pick. So that's a team that could do it, because they're so advanced that they could have moved that for a really legitimate player. They probably didn't get the offer that they wanted. But usually if you go through 82 games and you earn that first pick, you want to pick it.
You wanna pick it.
You don't want to spoil that one.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks so much for coming in
Always a
late and
pleasure.
joining with us. Good luck the rest of the day tomorrow, and we'll see you at Prospect Camp.
Yeah.
You got it.
Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you.
Doug,
Thank you
thank
very
you,
much.
sir. Appreciate
Thanks.
you. There you go. President of Hockey Operations coming down with us here to conclude tonight's NHL draft as the Blues select 19 overall tonight. Justin Carbonneau selected by the team. And Curb's perfect way to put a bow on this one as Doug Armstrong wrapped that one up. You kind of heard it was the guy that they targeted. They got the guy that they wanted.
Yeah, and so I again, and you and I touched on this, and how you end up to making picks and how you take the picks. They rank them.
Yeah.
And as you heard him say, they said in the mocks that we follow, that we believe in, which I thought was a fantastic look behind the curtain.
Absolutely.
There, on
Bob
who
McKenzie.
who they trust. Okay. But in the mocks that we have, and that they have, they really projected this player to not be there. So if they're that might be one of those situations where you're thinking, okay, he's still there at 18. We don't know that. I forget who picked 18th, right? But
Calgary.
Calgary was just ahead of the Blues. That's right. We don't know if Calgary is going to take him, or we think Calgary might take him. But we like this guy so much more than we like the next guy on our list.
Yeah.
Then you might find a way to try to move up, right? With Calgary. In this case, as he said, we were actually all prepared to start to looking at moving back. And by moving back, that's where they might have gotten a 3rd or a 4th round pick for tomorrow, right? Or a 2nd round pick.
Nashville did that a couple picks after the Blues where they got a 2nd round pick for tomorrow on top of their first.
So if Carbonneau's gone at 18 and they go, okay, Carbonneau's gone at 18, this next grouping of players, we'd be okay with any one of the 3 or 4. And we think that they'll be there at 23, right? Okay, well, if I can get a 2nd round pick for that, or a 3rd round pick to move up or to move back, or something along those kind of lines, maybe a depth player for your minor leagues.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we would have moved back. But, again, great insight. Hey, we hear him say, no, we'd say, what would it be? What would it look like? And then he says, no, we're going to stay with our pick, because here's a guy that so with the 19th pick, the way the Blues ranked the players that they thought would go ahead of them, they actually thought that there might only be 13 better players in this draft than Carbonneau.
Yeah.
Because if they thought he could go anywhere from 14 to 18, okay, that the highest they go, okay, we think that this would be a real solid pick. In other words, he might go, hey, listen, if we were picking 14th, we might take this guy.
Right.
That's really what that's telling you, right? So in that sense, from a Blues ranking standpoint for Blues fans, what you can think about is with the 19th pick, the Blues picked somebody that they felt ranked 14th.
Yeah. And I was trying to pull up where Bob McKenzie had Carbonneau. I believe they had Carbonneau at 14 or 15. So to the point of him saying, because McKenzie and Button are the two that I feel like everybody references in terms of when they put their rankings out there of the prospects. That's who you go to and you look at. But for a guy like Bob McKenzie to put Carbonneau at double checking this one so I don't get it wrong. Yeah, Carbonneau was 16th on his list. So somebody that they value at 16 and they get him at 19, that's one of those jumpers that Doug Armstrong was talking about.
So I asked a question to somebody a while back. And I said, if any one of the top 9 picks in the draft 2 years ago when the Blues took Dvorsky, right? In the 2023 draft, if any one of those players, like who would you think? So, of course, yeah, we would have taken Connor Bedard.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, okay, take that one out of the mix. And I said this. I said, let's assume that the top 5, right? Because I don't know, would they have taken Leo Carlsson over Dvorsky? I don't know. Adam Fantilli, they sure as hell would have taken him. Okay. Will Smith, and then David Reinbacher. I don't know that they would have taken him.
Leo Carlsson, they would have.
Okay.
He's Sweden.
So if you get out of the top 4 of that 23 draft of Bedard, Carlsson, Fantilli, and Will Smith, from the 5th pick to the 10th pick, David Reinbacher, Dmitry Simashev, that went to Arizona, Matt Vymichkov went to Philadelphia, Ryan Leonard, Washington, big one, Nate Danielson, Detroit, and then Dvorsky to St. Louis. I was told that definitely Ryan Leonard, if he had slipped to 10, and maybe Michkov. But outside that top 4, Dvorsky would have been one of their top picks anyway. So that's why they were so excited when he was available. So if you go to stlouisblues.com and under the YouTube channel, you go back and you watch the feature that the Blues put out about them when they're debating him and why, that excitement was real. So this is another case today that it wasn't worth a trade. A player that they had ranked higher than where they were actually picking was still on the board. We take him and you go and you see what happens.
Yep.
Pretty
So
cool
the Blues
thing.
get Justin Carbonneau as their 19th overall pick. They pick again tomorrow, 5th and 6th round. And as Kerbs mentioned, then the next week, so starting on Monday, they'll have their prospect camp out at Centene Community Ice Center, which is free for the public to come out and check out. Theo Lindstein is going to be there. Uri Pekarchik, a couple of other top players. And then, of course, their picks that they make tonight and this weekend will be out there as well. We'll be broadcasting BK and Ferrario on July 1st and July 2nd, which is the start of free agency for the Blues in the NHL.
I will be on Cape Cod on July 1st.
Yeah.
Okay,
Kerbs goes on vacation.
See you, Alex. Good luck with that.
Yeah, Kerbs goes on vacation, and you don't hear from him for a couple of weeks, which is a very good thing for him to do. Kerbs, I do appreciate you doing this tonight, man. It's fun talking hockey with you.
Excellent work, Doty. Thank you very much. Jordan, Alex, this was all your effort to pull this off and bring basically 3.5 hours of hockey programming to the fans in St. Louis.
Absolutely.
So, congratulations. Nice job. And we'll see you at the rink in a couple of days.
Yep. Shout out to Grant Francis as well, doing a phenomenal job back at our studio. Hope everyone enjoys their weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday right here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN.